start this recording. And I'm going to jump into Photoshop. So go ahead and fire Photoshop up for me really quickly if you don't mind. And also, if you look on your application folder, let's go ahead and start up. We're going to make a DNG. We're going to take the assignment pretty much for assignment 2 from the beginning all the way through to the end, just to make sure that everybody understands this and everybody's sort of on the same page. Oh, and another thing that you should know. So the due dates for all of the homework are right now. So it's 1 o'clock today, but nothing is late until I grade it. And I'm not grading it right now. So if you haven't turned anything in yet, which most of you shouldn't have turned anything yet, because I want to go through that process today as well, it's not late. Typically, I'll grade this. I try to stay on top of my grading, and I'm usually pretty good about it. So I'll get to it in the next few days. But as long as you get it in before the next few days, you're going to be fine on this. So I'm more concerned about you guys learning in this class than I am about you meeting deadlines. Makes sense? Even though deadlines are critical, I don't want to play that part down. But at any rate, if you can also launch the DNG profile, the camera checker, again, it's the camera checker, color checker camera calibration program for in Macintosh, and in Windows, I don't remember the name of it, but it's close. So does anybody not have this open and anybody not have Photoshop open? Are we good on all of this? Okay. So I'm going to start, we're just going to do it with the very first file that was in that assignment. So if you go to your assignment folders, the complete assignment folders, go to week number 2. Inside of your week number 2 is your student folder, or this is your folder. Inside there is the assignment folder, and we'll just do one for the very first one, the one that's at the very top. So again, there were 4 separate shootings, there were 4 separate sessions, and what I wanted you to do was build a custom profile for each of those, use it for the file that was actually in that session, color balance, and then turn that guy into me. That's what I was hoping to actually have everyone do. So again, I'm going to do this from the beginning to the end. I want you guys to do this with me. I do things pretty fast, so if you lose a step or whatever, just shout my name out. You don't need to raise your hand. Just say, wait a minute, stop me somehow on some level, and we'll get you caught up again. Because again, this is going to be basic workflow for the whole rest of the semester, so I need to make sure that everybody is on this page. Can you start me that? No, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to open up the very first of the first session of that group. Inside it is a capture folder with the same name on it. I'm going to open that up. And then inside mine, I've actually got multiple DNGs. You should have only had 2 raw files. You may have DNGs now because you've done this assignment. But for me right now, I'm going to throw both of these DNGs away so that I'm starting completely from scratch. Okay, so if we take a look at this, there's 2 files in here. One, if you see the little previews, one's got a color checker in it and the other one doesn't. So for us, we actually need to use the color checker to build our first profile for this shooting. Now remember, the profile that we're building is to deal with the discrepancy of the camera sensor. This is going to be a camera sensor profile. And even though this profile, I used this very same camera for all 4 of those sessions, the lighting in all 4 of those sessions was different. This is indoor strobe. There's outdoor shots that were done around noon. There was outdoor shots that were done later in the day. Those lighting changes warrant a unique profile for each of the sessions. However, once we get into this, so you'll see I've got 2 files here. I've got one that's got the color card and one that does not have the color card. The profile that I build for the one that has the color card will work for every single frame that I shot in this bar of this guy. So as long as I didn't change my lighting or change my camera body, if you have 2 camera bodies, you have to profile them both. So, but as long as I didn't change any of that stuff, that profile is good for all. Typically, when I shoot stuff like this, I'm usually in the range of around 70 to 100 images. that 70 to 100 images will work perfectly with the profile that I created in the very beginning. Is that clear to everybody? Does that make sense to everyone? All right, so I'm going to launch the version of this, the frame number 001, to, if I simply double click on mine, it launches in Photoshop, tries to come into Photoshop, but because it's a raw file, I need to tell Photoshop how I want to bring it in and how I want to work with it. So I set it here, it comes into Camera Raw automatically. If yours doesn't come into Camera Raw automatically, you need to let me know. Okay, so now here inside of Camera Raw, all I want to do is create a DNG of this. I'm not going to change any of the settings on this part. I simply need to build a DNG version of this frame in order to use it in the profile camera, in the camera profile creation software. So to create a DNG, I don't touch anything here. I simply go up to the little icon that was at the very top on the left-hand corner. It used to be, I'm sorry, the way the assignment was written, it said that you needed to actually click on the Save As button in the lower left-hand corner. That existed until this version of Photoshop. So they've changed it now, and my apologies that I didn't pick that part up, but that's why I sent you guys the announcement that I sent to you yesterday. To do the same thing, it's now that little icon that sits at the very top right-hand side that's a box with an arrow pointing down. If you click on that, it will actually open up. And as long as you've never made any changes in here, you don't need to make any changes in here. It's going to do exactly what we want it to do. If you click the Save button, you will see that the destination where it's going to save this DNG is in the very same location as the CR2 that made it. And I want it to be that way. It's going to name it the same thing. It's just going to change the extension on it from CR2, because this was a Canon file, to DNG, which is what we want it to do. The format's going to be digital negative, and you don't care about any of the compatibility, the JPEG, none of that part actually matters. So simply hit the Save button. And when you do that, it's done everything it needs to do. So for us now, we can simply hit the Done button down at the bottom. What Done does is it just closes the file out of Camera Raw. It doesn't open it up into Photoshop. If I hit Cancel, nothing would happen. If I hit Done, it simply goes back. It doesn't do anything to it. And if I hit Open, we go into Photoshop. So I'm simply going to hit Done. It goes away. And now if I go back into where for me, it's called the Finder. In Windows, I don't know what they call it. I don't know what they call it in Windows. But if you go and look at that very same folder, you will see that there is now a file in there that's exactly the same name as the original CR2, except its extension is DNG. And it's telling me this is exactly the same file. It's the one with the color card in it, but it is now a DNG version of this. So then I'm going to go to the calibration software, the color checker camera calibration software. Again, the Windows version is named slightly different, but I'm going to click on that and open it up, and you can see it. This is what it should look like. And if you can see the DNG that you made, you can do a drag and drop. If you can't see the DNG that you made, you can simply come up to the File menu, come down to hit Add Image. A dialog box will open up, and you should be able to navigate to that folder and actually load it. Sorry. But for me, I do see it, so I'm just going to do a drag and drop. So I'm simply going to click on the DNG, not the CR2, but the DNG. I'm going to drag it onto that program window. I'm going to go back into this program. I'm going to make it big. You'll see that you should get a loading image. And if you're lucky, it actually comes up and it shows you the color card that's actually been found. Although what's interesting about this one is it found the color card, but it's also confused. And you can see that it's confused right now because, again, I don't know if this is happening on your version. On the other versions, previous versions, because I've done this particular one 1,000 times, it usually hits it right on the money. In this case, it has not hit it on the money. These little green squares should be centered into the very middle of all of the color patches that are on the color card, and these are not. So you use the little green corners to actually change the shape of it to actually make it that way. So I'm simply going to drag them over so that the little green squares are sitting exactly in the middle of all of the little color swatches. And so now this thing has been oriented correctly. Is everybody good on this so far? Okay, so again, before I actually generate the profile, I'm going to go back to the file name. I'm going to come back to the file right here, and all I want to do is copy the name. So in the Macintosh world, if you click on the DNG to make it active, and then you hit the return key or the enter key, it selects only the name. It leaves the extension off of it. And then up to the edit menu, down to copy. All I'm doing is copying the name. Now, if you're really good at this, if you're good at entering numbers and dealing with numbers, you don't have to do this copy and paste thing. You can simply look at it and fill in the name. You can type it back in. I'm horrible at that stuff. I fuck it up every single time. So I'm a copy and paste guy. So I'm simply copying the name. That's the only thing I'm doing. And then I'm going to go back into my profile creation, into the color checker, camera, calibration, profile stuff. At the very top, there's 3 tabs that run across. There is a DNG, there is a dual Illuminate, and an ICC TIFF. What the DNG stands for is what we're going to do right now. It simply makes a customized profile for this shooting, for this lighting. If you wanted to, say, create a single profile that functioned for multiple different lighting scenarios, you would actually, so when I say multiple lighting scenarios, typically what people would do would be they would have a profile, they would have an image, a DNG that was shot in available daylight, average daylight, like a day like today. They would go out, shoot a color card. That would be the daylight version of it. But then they also would want one that was actually under tungsten light, hot lights. So they could do it either in your house under incandescent light, or, that's not a good sign, or studio lights, the hot lights that are in the studio, those are tungsten based. They have 2 different color temperatures. Typical daylight's around 55 to 6,500 degrees Kelvin. Typical color temperature of a studio light, tungsten light, whatever, is around 3,000. So one's much cooler than the other one, whatever. So you can actually build a program that averages those 2 together, a profile that averages those 2 together. That's what this dual Illuminate is. For me, that's cheating. For me, that actually defeats the purpose. I actually build a profile for every situation that I'm in. So if I'm shooting something outside, I do it for the one outside. If I move into the studio then under tungsten light, I build a separate one for the one in the tungsten light. They're more precise, which is the whole idea of this exercise. And then finally, this ICC-TIFF is, you can't use DNG profiles that are created, camera profiles. You can't use them in almost anything except for Adobe software. It works in Lightroom, it works in Photoshop. However, if you do Capture One, you cannot use a DNG profile in Capture One. You can use an ICC profile, and that's what this is, the last thing is about. I'm not sure we'll get to building ICC profiles, but if anybody does a ton of work in Capture One and wants to learn how to build these, maybe we can meet at some time. We'll either grab a little bit of time after class or during a break or something like that. But nonetheless, make sure that DNG, the one tab that's all the way to the farthest left tab is the one that you actually have selected, and hit the thing that says Create Profile. So it's going to bring up a Save As dialog box, and this is why I actually copy and paste the name, is because I don't want to have to type it back in here. You do not want to get rid of the DCP extension. That stands for Digital Camera Profile. So you simply want to get rid of the name. So I'm just selecting the name, not the extension, and hitting the minus or the delete key on my keyboard, or the backspace on a Windows keyboard. And then I need to paste that name back in, but you'll see I have no edit menu up here, so there is no paste option in a menu. If I hit the shortcut in a Macintosh world for paste, it is Command V, nothing happens. Again, I think this is a bug in the program, but it's been there forever. So instead, what you do at this stage of the game is you need to there is a drop-down menu that exists for this. If you're on Windows, you can do a right click and you will get the drop-down menu. If you're on Macintosh, you can do a 2-finger swipe on a trackpad and get a drop-down menu, or you can hold down your Control key and click, and you will get, over here, Control key and click, and you will get a drop-down menu. And in that drop-down menu, you will have paste. And so then simply click on paste. Otherwise, you're going to have to type this name in. Now, Realistically, I don't need the frame number that's on this, but I'm going to leave it anyway. But that 001 at the very end is the frame number. The 01 is the shooting that I actually care about. But nonetheless, the whole name is what I care about. If you click on the drop-down menu here about where this thing is going to be put, you will see that it is actually in my home folder, in my personal library of my home folder, under Application Support, under Adobe, under Camera Raw, in a folder called Camera Profiles. That's where that thing is, and that's where I'm going to place it. So I'm going to simply hit Save. It's going to go through its whole job to actually do this. I know. And hopefully yours isn't taking anywhere near as long as mine. But it says that my profile now has been created successfully, and applications that use it need to be restarted in order to actually work with the profile. Fine, I'm not finished with this yet. I don't actually need that part right now. We'll see if it shows up. I'm fairly certain it will. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then I'm going to quit this program. It's done everything it needs to do. I don't need it anymore. And I'm going to go back to where those CR2 files are. Now, the DNG that I just created to do this, I don't need it anymore. As a matter of fact, I don't really want it anymore because when it was built, that custom profile didn't exist. So it's not been applied to this guy. So I can build another DNG of that same file and apply the profile if I choose to. Ooh. Sounds like they're having heating issues, is what it sounds like, but who knows. At any rate, until somebody comes and says, okay, the building's on fire, and then, no, we're fine. I'm fairly certain we're fine. So at any rate, I'm throwing this DNG away. That's the only part I wanted to make. So I'm going to throw that guy away. So now it's like I'm starting over from scratch again. Again, I do have a sidecar file here. You can throw it, that XMP file, simply because I opened the CR2 file. So, but I've built my profile. It exists in another place. But in order to actually use it and color balance, I need to open both of these now, because you can see the file that I really want to work with, the one that you don't want to work with the file that's got the color card in it. You want to work with the file that doesn't have the color card in it. But you need all the information that the color card provides. So select both of them first, and then open both of those, and they should both open up into Camera Raw. And you can see in my case, they have. Now I've got mine set up due to my preferences so that my thumbnails are on the left-hand side. By default, I think the thumbnails go along the bottom. It doesn't matter. They function the same way. It's just the way I prefer my layout here. So with this first one selected, you can see I've only got one of them selected. There's a little white border around the thumbnail. The two things that you need to do for this are to apply the custom DNG profile and then color balance. Now, to apply the custom DNG profile, at the very top, under the word that says Edit, you will see here's the profile space, and there's four little squares, four little squares with a magnifying glass next to one of them. That is the profile browser. Click on that. It will actually open up a whole series of canned profiles that exist. There's Adobe RAW ones, there's color camera matching ones. I'm going to collapse that. Down here at sort of the bottom, well, sort of in the middle, there's a thing that just says Profiles. That is where your custom ones go. And if you click on that, it will actually open up, and you can see there is a copy of that file of the guy in the bar with the color card with that so long number special thing at the bottom of it. This is the custom profile that I just built. I'm going to click on that. That will actually apply the profile to this image. Then at the very top again, underneath the histogram, say what? Because you opened the DNG too, you didn't throw it away. Go ahead and quit out of that. Go back to the folder that they were all in. You should see 2 CR2s and 1 DNG.
There's only 2 CR2s.
Okay, so you've selected both of those, and then hit open. And you should only have 2 thumbnails.
Yes.
Perfect. So go ahead and apply the DNG profile to the first one, the one that has the color card.
Am I clicking on the browser or am I clicking on it?
Here, look at my screen really quick. This is what you're doing. Let me go back to where it was. Just go back to a different one. So this is how your screen looks like right now. Probably it says Adobe Color right now.
Right.
The little icon that's to the right of that, those little 4 squares, click on that. That is the browser.
Right.
It opens up. You'll see a whole bunch of thumbnails underneath you.
Right.
You don't want any of those. So these are all the Adobe Raw ones. Go ahead and collapse that little arrow for the Adobe Raw ones. And you should have underneath Adobe Raw, color camera matching, and then just profiles.
Right.
Click on open just profiles. You should, oh, you could have 2. You could have multiple ones in here. This is your, that's what you meant. Yeah, you're looking for the one that's got the guy in the bar in it.
Yeah.
All right, click on that guy. That is applied the profile now. Go back up to the top. Click on the back with the arrow pointing to the left. It collapses that window. So now we've applied the profile to this, which is great. But we have not color balanced this yet. And I can tell it hasn't been color balanced because it says right here the white balance is as this image was shot. This is just Adobe's guess at what it should be. But if you click on the eyedropper that's right next to that as shot, you'll get a little eyedropper tool and you can come over onto your image and you want to pick the little gray square that is just underneath the red. Now, I say just underneath. In this case, it's underneath, but if the card was turned 180 degrees, it would be the gray patch that is above the red. It's just the gray patch that's next to the red, no matter how the card is being held. And you simply want to click once. And you will see there is a color change that just happened to this image. It actually took on a considerably greater amount of red. That's in large measure because the floor is red. But at any rate, you will notice that in the white balance now, you've got the word custom. And that tells me that you have actually applied a custom white balance to this. So I know you've used the color card correctly. So now this image is perfect. Everything that we need done to it has been done. However, the image underneath, which is the one that I really want to work with and the one I wanted you to turn in, we haven't done anything to it yet. We need to apply all of the changes that we made to this first one to the one that's underneath it. Or in the case of doing big shootings, you could have 1,000 thumbnails here and you can do this all in one step for all 1,000 of them. You don't have to individually pick them. So the way we do to apply to everybody is hover over the thumbnail of the card, of the one that we've just worked on, the one that we've corrected, the one that's got the color card in it. When you hover over the thumbnail with your cursor, you should see 2 things. You should see, again, a box with an arrow that's pointing down and 3 little dots. You need to click on the 3 little dots and you will get a flyout menu. And in the flyout menu, your first option is to select all. So I want you to go ahead and select all. And you'll see that what just happened now is that a thinner, slightly darker frame got put around the image that's underneath. And that's just an indication that that image has been selected. Go right back up to still the thumbnail that's got the color card in it. You will see some things have changed now. I need you to click again on those same little 3 dots that are sitting on the top right-hand corner. You will get another flyout menu again, and in this flyout menu, you have sort of down about a quarter of the way, a thing that says Sync Settings. You want to click on that. And when you do, you will get a dialog box that opens up, and it'll say, what do you want to sync? And the checkboxes that are on here are every single possible thing that you can do in Camera Raw. Now, for our case, the only thing we've actually done is a white balance and a custom profile. However, all these other checkboxes are checked. It doesn't matter as long as those 2 are checked. If you want to play it safe, you can actually go at the very top. There's a drop-down menu where it says Subset, and click on the drop-down menu. And you could say, I want you to do all of the settings. And if you just click on that, then you'll see it checks every box that's in here. But at any rate, that part doesn't matter as long as white balance and that custom profile, because those are the only 2 things that we've done. We haven't done any exposure changes, contrast. We haven't done any of that stuff. So at any rate, then simply say OK. Now if you click on the thumbnail without the color card, you will also see it has a custom profile, and the white balance is also listed as custom. So it has applied the profile and the color white balance from the image that had the color checker in it to the one that doesn't. And now the one that doesn't is the only image that is selected. Again, I have no border around the one that has the color target on it. It's just around this bottom one. You want to export this as a DNG. So again, you come to the dialog box that's at the very top right-hand side, the box with the little arrow pointing down, click on it. Again, we don't need to change anything in here because it's already set up to do it, and hit the word that just says save. And then again, you can simply click on the done box. We don't need to actually do anything else. It was only to build that DNG. And if we now go back and look at our set where all of these images are, you will notice there is a single DNG in here that's actually of the frame number 2 that does not have the color card. And if you double click on that to relaunch it into Camera Raw, you will actually see that indeed it has the custom profile that we wanted, and it has the custom white balance. I'm going to close this out again. I'm going to hit done. So to get rid of that, I'm going to go back into my Finder, and I'm going to rename this DNG. And the name that I'm going to put for this DNG, because this is the file you want to turn in for your homework assignment. So to do this, I'm going to, again, select a name so that I can change it. And it's just the DNG. I don't want any of the XMP files. I don't want the CR2 files. It's just this one DNG for this part of the assignment. Last name first. Mine's Engelhard. Underscore, first name, Verser. Underscore. This is assignment number 2.2. So 2.2 underscore. And again, there's 4 files that you're going to turn in for this. This is the first of those 4 files. So the last digit that you put in here is a 1 because it's the first of 4. Now, you could actually leave it exactly as it says right here and simply put, so this is one way of doing it. Or if you've done all 4 of your images, you could come back here. I'm going to make a new folder. And in the new folder, I'm going to just type in Engelhard, the same naming convention, Engelhard, last name first, underscore, first name, underscore, 2.2. And then you would put all 4 of the image files for this assignment in that folder and simply put a folder into the Dropbox on the server. I don't care which way you do it. Are there questions about this? Did this work for everyone? Okay, so now let's talk about how you actually turn your assignments in. So, is anybody in here still unable to connect to our class project server? So Windows or Mac? Mac? So do me a favor. Go into your Finder. Come up to the Go menu, hold down the Option key and click. Do you see the word library anywhere in the drop-down menu? Perfect. You actually, I take that back. We don't even need to do that part. Never mind. You don't even have to hold down the Option key. Simply go to the Go menu and come all the way down to the bottom that says Connect to Server. Okay? Are you also, before we go any further, are you on the wireless network here? Okay, so as long you need to be logged into the network, otherwise, okay. So in the network, so you should get a dialog box that opens that says connect to server. Did you get to that? Okay, you need to type this in exactly as I tell you. It's all lowercase, so lower A as in apple, F as in Frank, P as in Paul, colon, the 2 dots, // 172 period 20 period 208 period 221. And then before you do anything else, there should be a little plus down here that is active. Click on that. That will save that address for you down here so you don't have to remember it. And then hit connect. And it should go through a rigmarole, and it should then ask you for your username and your password. Your username is your Oasis ID. Your password is the password you use to log into anything on campus here, whatever that is. So go ahead and type all of that in. And so you get this, right? So click on Class Projects and simply say, OK. Now, this should be true for all of you. I need everybody to log into the server and then just scroll down. There's a folder for every teacher here on campus. My last name is Engelhard with an E, E-N-G, so come down to that and click on that. And when you click on it, it opens up. Inside this, you should see 3 folders. You should see the assignments complete. That is the complete set of assignments for this class. So if you were to ever lose an assignment, just go here. It's all sitting here. You can pick it up again. There are some resources in here that come into the game later on. However, there is the software for doing the custom calibration profiles. That's the Windows version is this camera calibration setup EXE. The color checker camera calibration package, that's the installer for Macintosh. These are the instructions right here on how to actually connect to this same spot that we're in right now on either Windows or Mac. There's another stuff down here. There's a folder in here that says do not use because there's things that I cannot delete from this server. There's a thing called Jenny Scan. All of this stuff we're going to work on later. However, down here at the very bottom, this Wacom Tablet DMG and this Wacom Tablet EXE we are going to use today. Now you should have already copied those over. You should have these, but if not, we'll just get them here. But the Dropbox is the big one that you care about here. This is where you actually drop your homework. And you can see there's a lot of people who have already dropped their homework into this Dropbox. As a student, you cannot get into the Dropbox. So if you double click on this as a student, you're going to get an error message. It's a one-way thing. They don't want you to be able to get in here because there's nothing that would stop you from stealing other students' homework, putting your name on it and putting it right back in here. Or even worse, you hate one of the students in this class, you throw their homework away. So anyway, none of you are like that. So you simply drop that file that we created. So again, I'm going to go back to the folder that we just created that in my System 2 and the assignment folder. And either the folder that has all of them in there, you can see some people here have done folders and it looks just like this. But other people here have actually just done the actual files with a single digit after it. So that's basically what you're just turning in. So you could either turn that in or, again, that one DNG file for the first set. This would be the first of 4 that you would do for assignment 2.2. Is everyone clear on this? Yes.
In the second folder, there's 2 different pictures for the color checker.
There are.
Yes.
Did you try it with both?
I did make a profile for both, but I didn't know which one to use for.
Did you successfully make one for both?
Yes.
That's odd because you shouldn't have been able to make one for the first one. So the reason I put that in there, let me show everybody what you're talking about. Yep. I'm going to open both of these. You guys don't need to open both of these. Just watch my screen. I'm going to, oh, shoot. I'll show you what should have happened. And it, again, it just, software has changed. I'll explain it. Let me get them both open first, though. So hold on. Let me go right back because I only got one open. So there's two versions of color target in here. There's this one, this is the first one, and then there's the second one underneath it. And you can see the minute we go to the second one, it's a slightly darker exposure. And the reason this is a slightly darker exposure is that this color card right here is overexposed. If we zoom in, oh please, if we zoom in on this and try to color balance this, we'll sort of see what happens here. I'm going to try to click on that. In the older versions of Photoshop, you would be unable to do this color balancing. They would not let you do it. And the reason you can't do it is because this, the file itself is actually overexposed. So in this new processing engine of Camera Raw, so again, that goes back to an older version of Camera Raw, like the older versions that we were using when we were developing the castle last week. Remember, we went to an older version of Camera Raw because it has a different interface, and I had numbers for the different interface. So in the older version, you couldn't color balance this thing. It was too overexposed. And the problem, I'll show you why that is in just a second, but nonetheless, and you also couldn't make a profile of it. So if you went to actually color balance this, in the older version, you would get, well, actually, let me see. I might be able to get it. I might be able to trick this and get it to actually do it. So let me reset this, and you'll see what normally happens, and I think actually probably still should happen. I'm just going to reset that to its defaults, but I'm going to go to an older version of Photoshop. So I'm going to go back to version 2 and then see if we can color balance this. And yeah, it's still letting me color balance. So anyway, they've changed something clearly in the program. But anyway, it was basically to trip you up, if you really want to know the truth. It was to have you experience that, to know that when you're using this color card, it has to be properly exposed in order for you to get a good, legitimate profile from it. And if it is overexposed, then we run into a problem. There's nothing you can really do about that. You've got to shoot a version of this that's actually clean. And that experience, I think, is something you guys should have all gone through and know. But again, they've updated the software to sort of mitigate that part. I don't necessarily think that's a genuine thing, but it's not. I don't own Adobe. If I did, I would still be here because I love each and every one of you guys. No person any more than the other. No one any less. Are there questions about anything else in this? Are we good? Okay. Let's hit cancel out of here. You don't need to save any of this. Hit done just to get out of here. The next thing that I'd like to go through really quickly. So are there any questions about getting to the server, dropping the assignments, naming the assignments, doing this assignment 2.2? We've just gone through it all. Everybody good on this part? Okay. Next thing I'd like you to do is actually get your tablet alive and working. So first things first, if you've already done this, this is fine. If you haven't done this, we need to do it now. We need to install a program. So you need to go to the complete assignments folder that I gave to you guys. We are going to actually go to class number 1, which is where I think this is actually is, and I would be correct. So in class are your student files for week number 1. There are 2 files at the very bottom of this. There's a Wacom tablet 6.3.44-1 DMG. That is for Macintosh people. There's also a Wacom tablet 6.3.44.1 EXE. That's for Windows people. For the Macintosh people, you need to double click on the DMG and just follow the prompts to load it. And it loads the software that will run your tablet. I'm not going to launch mine because I've already got a version of it in there. And Wacom tablets get really, they do not like multiple drivers for themselves. For the Windows people, you need to simply click on the Wacom tablet 6.3.44-1 EXE and do the same thing. Just go through all the prompts when it asks you for a pint of blood and your firstborn child and the deed to your house and your mother's maiden name and your social security number and all the money in the world you ever will make. You just say yes. You're going to give it to him anyway. And we just need to go through all of those steps so that you've got the software that will actually allow your tablet to function. And I'm going to give everybody, I'll give everybody 2 or 3 minutes to do that. It shouldn't take that long. It should be pretty clean. If somebody has a problem, can you please Raise your hand, shout out, say Versa, this is not working, it didn't launch, I don't know what's going on, blah, blah, blah. Yes? Hang on. Yeah, it's telling you what? Oh, yeah. So if it's asking for security set, I'll hit try again. And it says that was successful, so go ahead and close it. We'll find out.
Yeah, because I know like when I did mine, I had to put in my document was a fingerprint for the
Right.
admin. I had to do my fingerprint for the admin for it to do things.
Yeah. So, but it looked like it said your thing was successful. We'll find out right now if it was or not. Okay, did anybody else have issues? Are we good? Okay, so in order to now use that part, in the Macintosh world, there's an additional set of steps you need to take. To do this, yes? Hang on. Go ahead and hit try again. Mm-hmm. It says the installation was successful, so you don't need to worry about it. Just get out of that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And you're good. Okay, so still, for Macintosh people, you've got to go through some extra steps. And now Windows may ask you to go through these steps as well. Usually in Macintosh you get prompted for this. But it looks like some of you may not have been prompted for this, so just make sure you go through these steps with me. Come up to the Apple menu at the very top left-hand side. Click on the drop-down menu and come down to System Preferences. That will actually open up. Inside the System Preferences that opens up, there is a panel for security and privacy. Now, depending on the version of system software you're using, this thing could be in different places. Sometimes it's in the top row, sometimes it's in the second row. But anyway, that's the one you want to click on, is security and privacy. It will actually open up a window. There's 4 tabs that run across the top. The one on the far right-hand side is privacy. You want to click on that tab. Then you need to unlock this window. So the lock that's at the lower left-hand corner, you want to click on that and either use your thumbprint or put in your password or whatever it is. If you have multiple users, which I do, I have a user that's just called Capture One, it will ask you for your fingerprint for the first one, but it'll ask you for a password for the second one. You have to unlock them both. And just say unlock. And then on the right-hand side, under Enable Services here, you need to scroll down and you should find a thing that actually says Wacom Tablet in here. Oh, this is under Location Services. I don't want to be under Location Services. I want to come down, so I'm on the left-hand side now. At the very top, you see it says Location Services. You want to scroll down to Accessibility. And in Accessibility, if you open that now, if you click on that to activate it, on the right-hand side, you should see a thing that says, in there that says something about Wacom. Mine says COM Wacom Input-Output Manager. You want to make sure that there's a check mark next to that. Continue to scroll down. You probably will get another one somewhere else down in here. Yes, there's another. I've got 2 of them. Anything that says Wacom, you want to check. So I've got 2 of them down at the bottom. Did anybody open this up and not see any Wacom at all? So if you didn't see Wacom, there's a chance that you haven't installed it. So make sure that you go through the run install part again.
Yeah, I'm looking at it's like open.
What's open?
The whole Wacom.
Oh, then you don't need to worry about it. You're good. So you've got the Wacom desktop is open? Yeah, you're good. All right.
Is it okay to have just one Wacom?
Yes. I'm sorry, what?
I wasn't sure if it was like if it actually ran through or not on this one.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Okay. To find out if this all worked, if you go to your Applications folder again, it's programs, I think, on Windows, and go down to the very bottom, you should see a Wacom tablet folder. And inside that Wacom tablet folder, you should see a Wacom Desktop Center. Now, I've got more in mind. Don't pay any attention to the number of other things that I've got in mind. But it's like a cyan W that just says Wacom Desktop Center. Can everybody find that? And double click on that. It'll actually launch it. Now, in my launches, I actually use a Bluetooth version of this. So I'm going to turn my Bluetooth version on. If you've got, you guys have just got USB plug-in, just go ahead and plug yours in. Not today, not right now. Update it like tonight, okay? Because that can just send us down a rabbit hole. But inside of this, once you get it open, you should have a thing that says devices, and you can click and you can actually see your device. And everything should be, as long as you've got this part, then your tablet is actually able to see your computer. And that's the part we care about. Did this work for everyone? All right, you can actually close this up. We don't need to set this here. We actually set the tablet up in a different place. So for Macintosh users, it's back to the Apple menu at the very top left-hand corner. Click on that, come back down to System Preferences again. And in System Preferences on Macintosh at the very bottom, you'll see Wacom Tablet. I need you to click on that, and it'll open up your tablet. For Windows users, I'm fairly certain this is in your control panels. So you, again, go down to your bottom left-hand part. I'm doing this from memory, and I'm not a Windows user, but down to the left-hand part near the Start menu or the Run menu, and you should get a fly-up thing, and somewhere in there it should have control panels. Is that true? Windows people? Oh yeah, you can actually do that as well. You can just type in Wacom Tablet, and it should take you to the control panel version of this. So in the control panel, we're going to go through this pretty quickly because there's not a lot. You do need your tablet out, and you do need your stylus separated from your tablet. I feel like mine's glued into mine.
Get there from the Wacom desktop if you click on settings and turn settings.
Oh, there you go. So if you can't get to it any other way, go back into the Wacom desktop. Jesus.
I know they get webs in there.
Go back into the Wacom desktop application, and apparently in there, let me see what it looks like here. In here, so yeah, click on settings here. If you just click on this pin settings thing, it should take you to the exact same thing. So once we are in there, just to go through this really quickly at the very top, most of you guys, anybody in here really has been using a graphics tablet for a long time, really comfortable with it? Okay, so most of you guys are novices, if not all, and that's not a bad thing because I'm going to teach you the good habits. These things are incredibly powerful, and they're incredibly deep to actually program. My suggestion is that when you first start working with these things, you put the training wheels on and you dumb this thing down, because otherwise it'll start doing shit and you don't understand why it's doing it, and you won't get the results that you want. So I'm going to suggest baby steps here at the beginning before you take off. So at the very top, there is application tab that runs across. And yes? So wait, none of you guys are getting to it? Oh, so that's saying a Wacom support. So go ahead and close that part up. Oh, you need to do your security settings. So click on Try Again. We didn't get them set for you, which we need to do. You can close this down here. Go up to your Apple menu, come down to System, click on Security, unlock it. Perfect, so Wacom is there. What does it say it wants? It wants accessibility on the left, unlock the settings, and then make all applications are checked, and scroll to the input monitoring. That's what we're looking for now. So over here on this side, go down to input monitoring, try again, and click on that. Yep, guys, there's a second setting in Apple's security settings. It's not just, hang on, I'll get to the rest of you guys in just a second. The security settings that we had to modify, we got one, but we didn't get the other. So again, in the security settings, click on Privacy tab all the way on the far right-hand side, unlock it. And then we already got accessibility. We clicked on accessibility on the left-hand side, and we clicked on everything that had Wacom in that. You also need to come down to input monitoring, which is right underneath it. Again, in the left-hand column, click on that. And also anything in there that has got Wacom listed in its name, you need to check on enable there. And then you can close that guy up. And that should take care of the Macintosh problem, people. Allison, you got window issues?
Yeah, it's just like not responding, I guess.
That's actually the installer again, I think.
Yeah.
You had it in the right place. So do your name search again. And click on Desktop Center. And it's back there. And then click on, it says no device connected. So this is not finding you. How do you have this connected? Yeah. Because it's getting power. We'll figure this out at the break. I'm guessing there's a driver that you need to install for this.
For yeah, like an ad.
For this. Click on updates to see what it says. It says the driver's up to date. It may just require a restart on your computer, but we'll figure it out during the break. Don't worry, you're not going to need it. You really aren't going to need it as bad today as you're going to need it in a week or two. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was heading to you to begin with.
So I keep getting this try again button, and then should I just hit and reopen?
Sure.
But
But before you do that, come back here. This is where we want to be. So on your input monitoring, that's checked. Go to accessibility. And scroll through that and make sure that anything in there that's got.
Yeah, this is the only thing I have.
Okay, that's fine. So you can close that guy up. Hit try again here. Good. And in here, click on, it says there's no devices connected.
Yeah.
You're having the same issue.
I think
So go ahead and hit start. It's just walking you through the get started quick guide.
not now.
Yeah, not now. Hit done. Fine, you can get out of all that. Go up to the Apple menu. System preferences. And click on Wacom tabs at the bottom. And you're good to go. Okay. So, back in how you configure this. So at the beginning, at the very top, you'll see it has applications. You'll see that there's all other, and then in my case, I've got a Photoshop one. You can add any applications because some people prefer to set up their tablets to function one way in Photoshop and a completely different way in InDesign. So you can do this on a program by program basis. Again, my suggestion is you do not add any applications to this. You just have your tablet work the same way for everybody. Underneath that, there's a series of tabs as well. It starts with tablet, and if you click on tablet, you'll notice on these tablets, I think you guys have the same one that I do, there's a series of modifier keys that run right across the very top. You can configure those modifier keys. I don't ever use them. If you want to, though, this is how you would change them. So if you go, see right here that the button on the far left-hand side, again, this little notch at the top is to indicate the thing that holds your pen, so it's telling you it's the top of the tablet. You can actually click on that drop down and you can change it to be anything that you want it to do. So if you prefer to say, for instance, that you want to let's say go backward or forward. Let's say you want that button to be something that you use when you're in a web browser. You can set it up to be a backward or a forward or a scroll or a pan. You can do all of those kind of things. My suggestion is that you don't do any of them. I don't use those buttons. I don't think you should do them right now either. Underneath this, because again, I'm actually working on a Bluetooth version of this. This has got a battery inside of it. I don't have a wire connection, so I actually have a readout on my battery. You won't have that. Next to the tablet tab, sort of towards the top, is the pen tab. If you click on this, this is how you can configure your pen. So if you take a look at your pen, you will actually see that there's one end that's pointy. That's the stylus end. And then one end that's flat. That's actually the eraser end. This is supposed to be just like a pencil or a pen would really be. And I can tell you right now, one of the biggest problems that people run into when they first start working with a tablet is they pick it up and they think they've got the stylus end that's pointing down on their tablet, but in reality they have the eraser end. And your tablet doesn't work the way you think it should. And the reason is that you're actually using the wrong end for your tablet. So it's the first thing to actually think about. Another thing to think about is that if you take your pen and you simply lay it on your tablet and then actually try to work with your mouse, in some cases your mouse will no longer work because it's actually trying to use the pen tablet as the input device. If you really hate your roommate and they've got an old enough computer, because they've updated the software, it's pretty smart now, it doesn't fall for this trick much anymore. But it used to be if you really hated your roommate, you could actually put a tablet like this, go ahead and activate it, put it on something underneath the desk and lay the pen right on it, and they won't be able to use their computer. I know it's mean, right? But anyway, I'm not that guy, I don't think. Anyway. So if you grab the pen the way it's supposed to be in your hand, just like it would be a pencil, and you come down and you actually press on your tablet, you should get a current pressure line. Now when they talk about tip feel, what they mean about tip feel is that the amount of pressure controls how strong or weak the input actually is. And you can assign pressure to a lot of things. So for instance, pressure in Photoshop can control flow, it can control opacity, it can control the size of your brush. There's a lot of things that pressure can actually control. My suggestion when you first start doing this is that you leave it at its default, which is the tip feel is right in the middle. If, on the other hand, you have just got like these monster hands and every time you actually try to be light and firm, it just goes screaming across, you can actually change how hard you have to press in order to get that to happen. To do that, you would grab the slider for tip feel and drag it all the way up to firm, and now you'll see you've got to press considerably harder in order to get the current pressure to go to the maximum. But again, just starting out, I'm going to suggest you guys keep it in the middle range. The double tap, the tip double click distance, what that has to do with, and you guys have all experienced this, when you go to open a file, you can double click on a file. But there's a time interval that determines what's a double click and what isn't. So for instance, take a look at my screen really quickly just so that I can show you guys what I'm talking about. I can let's see, I don't want to open a file here like that. I'm just going to go to just a regular, the same file that we've been working with, that CR2 file, or the DNG version of it. We'll just do the Bruce Fraser DNG. So I can click on the Bruce Fraser DNG, pause, and click on it again, and nothing happens. However, if I double click on it really quickly, it actually opens up. There is a time interval in between those two that determines what is a double click and what is just you've hit this thing 2 times, but you really didn't mean it to be a double tap. That timing distance is what this tip double click distance is all about. Again, I suggest you leave it in the middle, just to start baby steps. If you look at your stylus towards the tip, there is a rocker switch that sits up at the very front. It's actually a switch. It's a 2-part switch. It's connected so it rocks back and forth, but if you press the version of the button that is closest to the end of the stylus, you will get one result. If you push the button that's towards the eraser end, you will get a different result. And those results are controlled by this part right here, this drop-down menu. By default, the button that is in the back, closer to the eraser end, is a right click. And if you actually use it, you can actually hold it in your hand and click on it. You will get any place that you can get a drop-down menu, you will actually get a drop-down menu, or anything else that'll give you a right click. The front button is set up to scroll. You can actually change what these do. So again, you could change the front button to be navigation. You could change the back button to be whatever you want. Again, I suggest you leave it at its defaults right now. The next one over, mapping. How many people in this room are working on more than one screen in Photoshop? So for me, I work on 2 screens. I have a laptop that also drives a large monitor. You can actually control how your tablet is mapped to anything. It's either, if I had 2 monitors, I would have 2 sets of mappings, but I've only got 1 monitor right now, so I'm going to show you what my monitor actually looks like. There's also Wacom tablets that have a mouse as well, and you can do this mapping independent of the pen and the mouse. In our case, we only have a pen, so that's what's selected. The screen area refers to the actual screen that you're looking at, your laptop screen. You can actually change that and say, oh, I only want part of that screen done. If I click on this, it will actually give me an option to change what gets mapped. You want to keep your entire screen on there. You do not want to change that. So I'm going to cancel out of this. However, for the tablet part of it, so again, I'm mapping the tablet to the screen. If you click on this drop-down menu, take a look at mine. In mine, I don't like the way my hand feels on this tablet. So what I don't like about this is that when I work on a tablet, and this is true for all of Photoshop, you're working in a very small space. You're not doing, this is not like a painting thing. For people who paint, they get really large tablets because they want to do big, large brush strokey kind of stuff. That's how people paint. But for us in retouching, we are like minute, one small spot, just really hammering away at that one small spot. So I don't need my whole tablet. What I don't like about my tablet, about these smaller ones like this, is ergonomically, I hate it when half of my hand is on the tablet and the other half isn't. So I actually change. I kill the bottom third of my tablet. There's other people that will kill their tablet even more. They'll bring it even more. You can see what I've done on mine. I've actually pulled this bottom line up. If it was the full tablet, I'm going to just try to remember these numbers. I've got a 56 and a 15. So I'm going to take this back to its full just so you guys can see what's going on. If I go back to full, then the full tablet matches to the full screen. But again, it forces me to drop my hand off the lower part of the tablet to actually work on it. I don't like that. So I'm going to click on proportion. And again, it's already done this part. I'm going to drag it back up to the very top, or you can put in these. These are the coordinates that I actually put in. So this is the live area of my tablet. You can do these by numbers, or you can actually click and drag these lines around, or you can click to define, where it says click to define the tablet area. It will allow you to actually put 4 corners onto your tablet to define that. It's just my personal preference. Again, I would suggest you guys at this beginning stage of the game, keep your whole tablet active. It'll just be a little bit easier, I think, here in the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then finally, I'm going to click on options down here. Yeah, we don't want to deal with any of this, so I'm going to just leave that at their defaults. And then finally, the on-screen controls. Again, I'm going to leave all of these at their defaults so that we don't, this doesn't take off and become something that you don't want it to be. And then I'm finally going to hit OK, hit to just close that up, and your tablet's now ready to go. So if you actually hover your stylus over your tablet, you should be able to come up to the top left-hand corner of your tablet and actually see your cursor up there. You should be able to get all the way down to the bottom left-hand side. You should be able to go all the way up to the top right-hand side and also to the bottom right-hand side, and then anywhere in the middle. If you've got that, then your tablet's actually good to go and you're ready to work with it. So is everybody except, I think Allison and I have still got to do some work to get hers to work. Yeah, but we will get it to work. But everybody else is okay? Whew, good job, guys. All right. Before we go any further, today is about, today's a big day. I think, and it's kind of by design. Some of you probably have the impression that, Jesus, when are we going to get to the really retouching part? We haven't done anything here, but we've done a little, we've done a lot of prep work here. But that prep work is actually key for what we've actually done in this class. But today we actually are going to start working. Well, we did a little bit of work in Photoshop last week, but today we get into it pretty deep. I think, well, certainly today we are going to move considerably closer to what you guys, I think, were probably expecting in this class, and that won't change for the rest of this semester. So I'm going to turn the lights on because this is kind of a two-part thing you need to watch. We're going to talk about monitor calibration, and I'm going to show you what one looks like. Okay, you guys can still see my screen, hopefully well enough. I just need to remind you of a couple things. All right, let me stay, again, to get this to record. Okay, so remember, this is our color managed workflow thing. So we're starting over here again. This camera profile right here, what this is that, again, you take a picture with your camera. Your camera is a device. It has device dependency in it. To remove that dependency, again, to normalize that sensor, to set that sensor to a standard, we have to actually profile the sensor. That's what the D&G whole thing was about. And then use that. And so we're using that here in Camera Raw. That's what this little square is about. And then once we use it, we can actually bring it into Photoshop. And Photoshop is our conversion space. This is where we can actually, this is the Adobe Photoshop Workspaces is a Camera Raw or sRGB or ProPhoto RGB. There's a bunch of them. You can actually make your own. There's a Bruce RGB. There's a bunch of different ones. Pretty much the standard that we work with, I've always worked with, it's never let me down, is Adobe RGB. It's big enough to really hold the majority of what your camera can do. It's not so big that you lose information on a screen. Most screens, really high-end monitors, do their best to actually reach 100% of Adobe RGB. There has never been a screen made, and likely will never be a screen made, that will show you all of ProPhoto RGB. So I find those things problematic. A lot of teachers will tell you, oh, you need to use ProPhoto RGB, or you need to accept the defaults in Lightroom. Lightroom works in ProPhoto RGB. ProPhoto RGB is such a big color space. Number one, it forces you to work in 16-bit or your image will get really fucked up quick because, again, it's such a large space. ProPhoto 8-bit has not got enough information to describe the space without there being huge gaps between colors, and that becomes the problem. That's why you'll see things posterized, you'll see things really pixelated if you're working in 8-bit ProPhoto RGB. But ProPhoto RGB actually is so big, it's larger than what your eyes can see. And it's certainly bigger than what your computer monitor can show you. So do you really want to be working on a file that's got colors that you can't see? I don't. So anyway, but now we need to make this guy right here, the monitor profile. It is a two-step process. The first step is to try to normalize our monitor, which actually means we need to set it to a standard. And once we set it to a standard that we want it to work on, then we profile it and come up with its discrepancies. And between those two steps, you can actually end up with a profiled, calibrated monitor. And that's going to be this step that we make right here, so that anything that is in Photoshop gets adjusted for our monitor. And if everybody in this room does it correctly, all of our monitors will essentially look the same with the same file. Does that make sense? Okay, your monitor profile, just like your sensor profile, is specific to your computer, to this monitor. If you've got 2 MacBook Pros, you can't use the profile you make for one on the other one. It is unique to the device that you're doing it for. So at any rate, this is what one looks like. There's several versions of this. This is an i1 profiler. This is the Studio Professional version of it. In the Photo Studio itself, they have one that looks just like this, but it's a studio version, not a professional version. It simply means you have to use a different piece of software. It's all made by the same company. They all look the same. You just need to know which version of the software actually runs your computer. Better still, my suggestion is don't use the one in the studio. Actually, you can check these out of the media center downstairs on the 4th floor. You could actually check one out. It takes about 5 minutes. You're going to see, we're going to profile my monitor right now. It takes about 5-10 minutes to actually do it, and then you can just give it right back to them. Or you could take it home to your house. You can check it out for like 2 or 3 days. Make sense? So I'm going to go through the steps of actually doing this. You'll actually see it up on screen. My biggest piece of advice to you first is you want to wipe down the surface of your monitor, because if there's a bunch of dust on it, fingerprints, all that kind of stuff, it'll pervert what this thing does. The second thing is that you want to plug this in before you launch the software. Again, they may have worked this bug out now, but it hasn't been the too distant past where if you launch the software and then plug this in, it would go through the entire process, and at the very end, when you went to actually save the profile, the computer program would crash and it would lock up and crash. And so then you have to do it all over again, which is very frustrating. Okay, I'm going to set this up. I'm going to actually plug it in to my USB. I'm going to launch the program. In the version that you get from the Media Center downstairs, there'll be a little thumb drive in there that's got the software on it. Finding the right software for this is really difficult to do. Again, like Wacom, X-Rite has got 1 billion products with 1 billion drivers, and the likelihood that you're going to hit the right one is almost non-existent. So use the thumb drive version. There's software for both Windows and Mac on it. Install it, and then once you get the correct one installed, you can go in and check to see if there's an update or that kind of stuff. And if there's an update, you can go ahead and do the update part. You'll be fine. But if you get the wrong software, it won't work, and you'll be really frustrated. So I am going to go to the correct software. It's actually called i1 Profiler. When you open this up, you guys can see my screen okay, right? Yeah. When you open this up, you'll see that there's an iProfiler app, and then there's an iProfiler tray. That is for a completely different item here. You want to just launch the iProfiler app. Actually, I'm going to kill some of this light in here and make this a little easier to see both. So it launches, and you will see, depending on the product that you have from X-Rite, you can profile all of these things. You can do display, which is monitor, a projector, a printer, or a scanner. This puck, this hardware right here, will only do projectors and monitors. They do have the bigger version, big brother of this, which almost is this big. It looks like about like this. It will let you do print profiles as well, which we will do later on in this class, just to get you to the third and last part of the whole color managed workflow part. But we're not doing any printing right now, so I'm going to put that part off. Is everybody good on that part? So you click on what you want to profile. I'm going to click on this display. And in this case, well, that's interesting. This has also figured things out. It used to be when I would actually click on this that I would get 2 things up here to possibly profile. One would be the projector, and the other would be my computer screen right here. But apparently they have figured this out in the software that I don't want to do that projector, which is great. So I am going to leave the default here. If you click on this drop down, it actually senses what technology is in your computer for you to actually use. In my case, it's this PFS photo. It's a phosphor. That's what's actually giving me the color of my screen. So I'm going to say leave that part at its default. I'm just making this larger so you guys can see. In the white point right here, this part becomes critical. We talked about color temperature before. Again, color temperature around that 3000 range is the tungsten light. It's very warm light. A color temperature of like 9000 is top of Mount Everest on a really clear blue day. Right somewhere in the middle, that really warm of the tungsten intersects or it cancels out that really cool of daylight at again on at like Beijing. Somewhere right in the middle, they cancel one another out, and you end up with neutral color. This is again just like setting the white point that we just did in Photoshop. And it's 6500 degrees Kelvin. In this drop-down menu, that's what the CEI Illuminance D65 stands for. This is the one that is on by default. I just want to point out that there's other ones in here. You can set these different things for different reasons. In this class, you will never set it for anything other than D65. If it comes down to X, Y, all this kind of stuff, this is really for technical people. If it's on native, all of this is wrong for our general purposes. You want to make sure, you should be writing this down, you want to make sure that this is set to D65. The next thing that you want to actually write down is the tone response curve. Now, without getting too deep into this, what it basically means is that monitors are linear devices. Your eyeballs are not. Your eyeballs are logarithmic devices. And if you don't understand what those terms mean, don't worry about it. That's not what this class is all about. It is merely to say that the response of a monitor needs to be corrected so that we see with our eyes the way we expect to see with our eyes. The reason that they have different options here for this tone curve is that there are scientific applications where you do not want your monitor to show you something the way your eyeballs would see. Again, without getting too technical in it, people who work with electron microscopes, a lot of scientific work, they don't want to see a tonal adjusted response curve. They want to see a flat response. So this allows you to do that. But for our work, you need to have the monitor emulate the way your eyes see tonally. And that is by applying a curve that has a gamma of 2.2. So the number that you want to make sure, you don't necessarily need to worry about this drop down so much as you need to worry about this gamma setting right here. And you want to make sure it is 2.2. And this is true now for every monitor in the world. It used to be in the old days, really old days, with tube monitors. In a Macintosh world, they would actually set this at 1.8 because they were trying to emulate the tonal response of a piece of paper. Nobody accepts that any longer. Everybody sets it at 2.2, and this part's critical for you to do that. The next thing down, this ambient smart control, the reason you do not want to check that is that it defeats the purpose of the profile. Again, we've already shut this off in other places. We're going to revisit that in 1 second. But what it basically does is it says, okay, we're going to use the camera in your computer to measure the ambient light, the light of the room. And as the light of the room gets brighter or darker, we're going to make your screen brighter or darker. Well, that completely defeats the purpose. We've already talked about this. You should be doing your retouching in a controlled environment where there isn't light varying over the course of the day. Your room should be as dark as it could be without you stumbling and tripping over the furniture to actually set your black point. That's what sets the black point, is your environment. We've had this conversation already. Everybody remember this part? So that's what controls black point. Now we're going to talk about what controls white point. And white point is the brightness of your monitor. There is no way you can guess what that is. You actually use this little instrument right here to set the brightness of your monitor, which sets the white point of your monitor. That in turn sets the dynamic range of your monitor. Your environment, black point. Your brightness of your monitor, the white point. Make sense? We're trying to get everything locked down to one standard. That's the goal in all of this. Are we good? However, Macintosh, and I'm sure Windows to some level, makes this complicated as well. Again, this will be in the recording. It's also, there's a PDF on our website that'll give you all the steps to follow through on this. So if you get lost in this part right now, don't worry too much. There's a PDF. You can just follow the steps to go through it. You come up to the Apple menu to System Preferences. Inside of System Preferences, you click on Displays. And inside of Displays, there is a number of things that you need to shut down. The first is this automatically adjust brightness. You do not want that to happen. Again, this is where your computer actually will change the brightness of your screen depending on the ambient light of the room. If this was on and this was on in the profile itself, they both would start to fight one another. This true tone, you actually don't want to have that part on there either because it actually changes the color of your monitor depending on the conditions. If you come over to this night shift tab, you also want to make sure that this is off because this also changes the color temperature of your computer depending on the time of day. Again, it's all in a way to make people who do spreadsheets at night or watch porn feel good that they can see what they're looking at. But for people who care about color and tone, the work that we're doing in this class, this is a nightmare. This is your computer taking over and controlling it and you not. So you need to make sure that you've turned all of that off, and you would think that would be enough. It is not. Still inside of the system preferences, you need to come down to accessibility. And in accessibility, you need to come down to display. Now, don't ask me why they don't have this preferences in the display preferences, but they don't. At any rate, you need to click on this to turn it on, and you need to check reduce transparency. What transparency is in the Macintosh world is that Macintosh actually allows you, depending on the screen that you have up, it allows you to actually see through to elements that are underneath it. And they thought it was a very clever, cool looking way to navigate. You could tell what was right underneath it and then click on something. Anyway, that was what that was all about. The problem that we run into is that this program is going to start to kick out color. We're going to use this hardware puck to measure that color. And if the color that we're looking at is transparent and showing on something underneath it, then whatever color that's underneath it or tone that's underneath it changes the color that we should be measuring, and it perverts the profile again. So you need to make sure that the reduced transparency is checked. And then finally, this display contrast should be nothing but normal. If this is changed in any way, you are in for a world of hurt. This never changes. This really shouldn't exist, in my opinion. So at this stage of the game, we're actually ready to start the profiling process. So back in the software, you click on the little next button that's sitting down at the bottom. And it's a little bit hard to see it on this screen. And depending on if you've got your screen, if it happens like this and it's up too high, you'll notice that you can't see the start measurement button at the very top. On some versions of the software, the start measurement button is at the bottom, but depending on how you've scrolled through this, it doesn't show you the entire screen, which I think is a mistake. But at any rate, it doesn't do it. So just realize that a start measurement button is somewhere on here. It's not the next button here. The next button here will actually take you to creating the profile. However, there's a couple last things that we need to set up on this. And the last thing that's really down here is that there's two ways that monitors can actually control tone and color. One of them is this automatically display control. Again, it's hardware that's inside a high-end monitor. So if you have like an Azio monitor, or it would be higher than the BenQ. There's just monitors that are extremely, if you've spent $10,000 on a monitor, you need to talk to me about which of these things to set. For the other 99.9% of you, you want to leave this adjust brightness, contrast, and RGB gains manually. That's what this puck is actually going to do. So make sure it is checked, and then you will see there is a grid of color and tone here. So what's going to happen is when I hit start measurement, it's going to tell me how to place this hardware puck, and then it's going to start showing me these colors one at a time. And this puck is going to measure the color that my monitor puts out, and whatever discrepancy between the known color that it kicks out and the color that my hardware measures, that is what builds the table for my profile to correct for the discrepancy in my monitor. Does this make sense to everyone? This is just the same version of what we did when we made our camera profiles and we had all those little color patches. That's exactly what that software is doing. It's the exact same thing. It knows what those colors should be. It then measures what they really are off of your sensor, and whatever discrepancy is between those two, it builds a table to correct that discrepancy, and the result that you end up with is a device-independent color workflow. Good on this part? All right, so I'm going to hit start measurement. And you'll see that it says it's going to walk you through what to do with this puck. So if you can't see this and you want to stand up or you want to come over here and get closer, whatever you want to do, just make sure that you can see this part. The little drawing in here, the little animation thing in there is pretty good. There's a protective cover on the front of this. You can see right now it's got a frosted piece of plexiglass on the front of it. You simply, right now it's set in place. You actually pull it away from the puck. It only moves like 1/8 of an inch, but it releases it so that you can actually spin this around and reveal the clear lens that you're going to actually use to do the measurement part. And you'll see the software program is aware of every step that you're making in here. I had a little blinking lights on this the whole time telling me that it wanted me to pay attention to this and do that move. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, read this, and you'll see here it says, for best results, be sure that the measuring device is resting squarely on your display. So the trick to this is that you tilt your display back a little bit so that this thing really sits on it. Because if your screen is tilted back, this is going to hang off of your screen. If your screen is tilted back, this will stay on it. If your screen is tilted the other way, this falls off of it away. And if it falls away from it, you don't have contact, you don't have a good measurement. There is a counterweight on the back of this. It slides along the cord so that you can actually use this to position the puck in the middle of your screen, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to lay it in the middle of my screen. The weight is holding it in the back. Again, I've got my screen tilted away so that the puck is pressing against it. And I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, I got that part. And then I'm simply going to hit next. And what's going to happen now, and then we're going to take a break. We're going to take an early break today because I want to leverage being able to let this thing run. What it's doing right now is the first thing that it's doing is it's establishing the brightness of my monitor. So in our setting right here, and actually, I'll take that back. I'm going to go back. I don't see where we actually set the target for our brightness. So hang on one second. Oh, target luminance. We missed this. So I've just gone back to where we set our white point to D65. In terms of our target illuminance, this is the brightness of your monitor. Now in this click drop-down menu, you'll see that they have a series of built-in options. 120 candelas per square meter, which is what that CD /M2 stands for, candelas per square meter. It's strictly an old measurement of how bright something is. Candelas was actually based on candles. And so this would be actually the light that, how many candles would light up a square meter? That's what this value is. It's just a way to establish brightness. The default is 120. My suggestion to you is you go to 140. That's where I like to be. You'll see that there is no 140 in here. I'm actually going to use this, I'll just use this drop down to give me a custom and put in 140 candelas. Somewhere between 120 and 140 is where you want to be. If your monitor is brighter than that, the problem is, depending on the room that you're in, you'll ultimately make your files, your screen will look really light. You'll put a curve on there to bring it down so that your image doesn't look so bright. But the problem is that it's not your image is too bright, it's that your monitor is too bright. So when you put that curve on to make your image on your screen look correct, it actually makes your image too dark, and therefore when you print it out, your images look too dark. Make sense? All right, so I'm going to set this up to the 140. That's what I do mine. That's what I do all my monitors for. Again, I'm going to hit start measurement again. It knows that this is actually correct. So then I'm going to put it on here again, make sure it's setting, that it's sitting flush to it. I'm going to hit next again to start this process. So this first step that it's going through is it looks at my black point, my white point, and then these are the primary colors, and then it comes back and it tells me where I'm at in regard to my brightness. And you can see right here, my brightness, the scale that's right up here, it's telling me that I need to increase the brightness of my monitor. You can also look down here in the sort of lower part. The target luminance is 140. That's what I'm going for. If you set yours to 120, this number will read 120, and that's fine. But in my case, I'm going for 140. The measured luminance, which is right under it, is saying it's 130. That's telling me it's not quite bright enough. You guys, not a single person in this room will end up with this mistake. Every single person in this room will end up with your monitor way too bright. So, and your monitor can get really bright. Your monitor can get like into the 400s, depending on your computer. Some of them can get even higher. So, all this is saying to you, you need to increase the brightness. This is the worst part about working with a Macintosh, and I doubt Windows is any better. At this stage of the game, you need to take out your phone. You need to open it up. You can do this with me. You guys can probably do it faster than I can do it. So I'm going to actually, but I'll show you how to do it anyway. I'm going to take out my phone. I'm going to actually get my photo app going. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to my control bar, and I'm going to hit the brightness once. And you can see that when I hit that brightness once, my measured white luminance jumped to 172. It's now too bright. And you can see that the quality indicator is telling me you need to bring it down. So, but if I hit the down button here, I'm going to go right back to that 130. Or in this case, I go down to 124. It's even worse. However, in Macintosh, if you hold, and I'm hoping this, I hope I remember this part right here. I think it's the Option key. We're going to find out right now. Yeah, it's Shift Option. If you hold down Shift Option, instead of doing these really big jumps in brightness, it'll actually do really small increments, and it'll allow you to get much, much, much closer. So you can see I've held down my Shift and Option and just got it a little bit brighter. I went from a 124 to 136 instead of up to 172. Now, this is really close. I'm going to hit the brightness one more time, and it's going to be too much. So I go to 146. I hit it twice. I'm going to come back down. 148, a little too bright for me. Again, this 136 is where I want to be. It's in my range between 120 and 140, so it's very close to 140, so I'm going to leave it here. However, I have no idea how bright my monitor really is. So here's the trick, and it's the hardest part to do. You need to actually make it either brighter or darker. It doesn't matter. You need to go to one step in the other direction. You need to get your phone out, and I want somebody to do this for me, please, because this gets really hard to do doing this all yourself, but I'm going to try. So I'm going to hit the brightness one more time, and then did you see a set of little bars that came up along the bottom? I didn't either. Great, this is going to tell me that. There they are. See those little bars? You do see it on this screen, right? Yeah, see that little thing at the bottom? It's got those little bars on it. I'm going to get mine up to, so this is now too high, 148. Somebody get ready to take a picture. You guys ready? All right. Shoot it. Then you need to look at the picture that you just took of those little bars, and that's the brightness setting that you need to have on your screen. What I do, Annalie, can you just count up the number of little dots that there is? So here on my screen, again, look at the screen that I'm talking about here. I have 12 of those little things plus a little bit extra into the 13th one. You write that note down so that whenever you want to do color critical work, that is the brightness setting that you set for your screen. So if you want to change the brightness to actually see your porn better at night, or to actually, I don't know, burn your eyes out while you're gaming, whatever it is you want to do, or you want to be in a really moody mood and make it really, really super dark, you can do all of that. But when it comes back time to do color changing, you have to have the brightness set the place it was when the profile was made, or the profile is no good. Does this make sense? Is this a horrible way to do it? There should be a way to actually set brightness by a number. I should be able to set it, measure it, and say, okay, my brightness is set to, I don't know, 15 and a half or 12 and a quarter, or whatever it is. But again, I don't work at Apple. They don't listen to me. So let me set this correctly again, and we're almost ready.
And what key command was that again?
So on Macintosh, to get the finer increments, it's the Shift and Option key, and then you still use the brightness control on your keyboard. So I'm at 136 right now, and I'm going to hit next. So what's happening now is the first step that's actually happening in here is it's going to set the white point of my monitor. So what it's doing now is true calibration. It's trying to get my monitor so that it is that neutral D65, so that it's not too warm, it's not too cool, it's a neutral color. That's what it's trying to do right now. It's also trying to give me a contrast curve on here of 2.2, so that the contrast that I see on my monitor, the range from black to white, makes sense to my eyes. It mimics the way my eyes, well, the way the world works, so the way my eyes expect something to be seen. So that's the first step, and you can see it's going through it one at a time. It's going to do this pass 3 times. It's going to do, well, it doesn't do the whole thing the third time, but the first time is to try to calibrate your monitor. The second pass is to then profile your monitor to see how it's doing with color. Is color working well for you? Is it, what are the discrepancies? We need to build the table. We need to build the profile to actually do this. But this is why it becomes so important to do this work, is that over the course of time, monitors drift, they change, they get older, the dyes that are actually used in it fade. So this is not something you can do once and then just forget it. You have to do it over and over and over again. How often? I've told you the story already about Pixar. If you work for Pixar, it's every day or you're fired. For us, what I would suggest that you do is right off the bat, you've got to do this before you do another piece of work in any photography at all. You've got to do this now. When do you do it again? Well, you certainly do it anytime that you're doing color critical work. So if you're doing color critical work tomorrow, you do it again tomorrow. If you're doing color critical work again the day after, you do it again the day after. However, if it's just general course of things, your profile is probably good for a week, maybe 2. But every couple of weeks, you should be doing this. And again, you'll see how quick this whole part goes. So it's going to go through this, and let's do this. Let's do this. I'm going to say this is 2:40 right now. Let's go ahead and take a break right now. I'm going to let this finish, but I'm not going to stop it. Make it a really hard 15, so you guys need to be back at 5 minutes of 3, and I'll see you then, and we'll pick up this part again. And Allison, if you want, you and I will try to troubleshoot that tablet, okay? If you want to go grab something or whatever really quick, go ahead.
What if you don't get like the little bars to control your brightness on your computer? What if it's like a slide bar?
Then you need to change it.
Okay. How do you change that?
So you can go, I'll show you. It's actually in,
Settings?
yeah, it's going to be in your system preferences, yeah.
System preferences should be.
Just go up to your Apple menu and come down to system preferences. Yep. And then, yeah, because you've got the same control bar that I have, and I'm pretty sure it's on here. Track keyboard. And, well, certainly you need to adjust. Oh, that's the brightness of your keyboard. That doesn't matter. Touch bar, control strip. F key does nothing. Customize control strip. And it's just letting us change it. So now it's done the whole process. It's saying I've actually profiled this part, and then you get this little cartoon thing that comes up, well, this little demonstration that comes up, and it says, okay, we need to now undo the puck. We need to protect the puck again, so you take it off of your screen. Again, it's blinking rapidly, calling you attention to the fact that you need to take care of this guy. And again, now you actually rotate that protective cover so that the white plexiglass covers the lens. The lens is what you really need to worry about. And once I do that, you'll see the computer, it says put it down next to your computer screen. So I'm like, yes, yes, Overlord, I'll put it down. Hit the next button again. And take a look at this. It says that the measurement was successfully completed. And I'm going to say, okay, fine, I'm glad you notified me of this, but this is what I want everyone to look at. You see the squares that are on our color target now? So the top half of the square was the color that was asked for. The bottom half is what my computer gave it. So you can see right here, in the reds, it's not necessarily so bad. Like these reds are relatively close. The blues are actually even closer still. But look at some of this stuff. This is the color. Again, remember the color that's in the top left-hand half of it is the requested color. The color on the bottom lower right part of it is the given color. And look at how wild this is. There's no way you can do color-corrected work when your screen is showing you this much lie. Oh, it's insane. And you guys have been struggling years trying to figure this shit out, and you never had a chance. You never had a chance. So this is how important calibration becomes. Are we good on this part? All right, so the final thing that I'm going to do right here, again, is I'm going to hit the next button to go over. And it's going to say, do you want to save this profile? And I'm going to say, yes, I do want to save it. But you need to give this a name that's meaningful. Color LCD with the date is not meaningful. So what I'm going to do is change the name of this to MacBook Pro. So that's because it's mine. I'm going to do an underscore, and then I'm just going to throw my initials in here so that I know that this is my MacBook Pro, that I actually was the one who profiled it. And I want to keep the date. So again, the date that they use here is based on a European date. So it begins, I think this is actually wrong. If this was, so I'm going to actually change this. With them, they actually start with the month, with the day, the month, and then the year. I'm going to do just the reverse to make it actually, that will keep all of my profiles in chronological order. So it would be 2022-0208. That is the actual date. Now, you can only put this in user level anymore. You can put a reminder up on yours. So if you are the kind of person that needs to be reminded to do this shit, you can actually say, okay, a week from now, there's a little thing that'll flap on your screen that says time to calibrate your monitor. So you can actually set this in. I calibrate mine anytime I need to, so I don't need to worry about that. Again, you need to check to make sure that this ambient light monitoring is actually turned off. The profile is named correctly, and then you simply hit Save Profile. It says that the profile was saved correctly. It'll give you a whole bunch of readouts on it. It'll also give you ways to compare images here so that you can go through a whole series of profiles. I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to show this to you guys on screen, but you cannot see it where you are. You need to, how do I do this? I don't think you're going to see, I know you're not going to see this because it's going to show, tell me if you do see this. I'm going to show you where you go find out to make sure that this actually worked. Up to the Apple menu, down to System Preferences, down to Displays. And inside of Displays, again, this is for my monitor. This other background display right here is for the projector. So on my monitor, if you click on Color, the profile that we just made should be sitting right here. And it actually is sitting right here. So I don't know if this is going to change on the screen or not, because I think the profile that's on this for this monitor is controlling what you see right here, but we'll see if there's a color shift or not. No, there is no color shift, but I'm going to hold this up for you guys to see right here. Actually, I'm not going to do that because this is going to fuck this up. I need everybody to crowd in, even though we're not supposed to do that. But come around on this side over here, because if I take this too far, I'm going to unplug everything. So I just need you to be able to see this monitor. I'll wait for everybody to get over here. Scooch up in here so everybody can kind of come in and see. Just to give you some idea of what really did change. Yeah, oh, you can drop down, whatever. All right, hurry up quick, guys. All right, you need to be able to see the monitor. It won't matter. All right, can everybody see this thing? That's all right. Okay, so this is the color that it's actually giving me to right now. This is what Apple ships. Wait, it gets worse. Let's show just the desktop. All right, color profiled, Apple profile. See any difference? Look how much blue is in this. Apple ships their computers with 9,000 degrees Kelvin as their white point. You'll never be able to color correct anything if you believe your monitor, ever. It's just too blue, and there's no way of getting around it. This is the only thing that you can do. Are we good on this part? All right, you guys can all go back. So, after a long and drawn out 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks, whatever, we have finally reached the place where we have got a device. We've removed the device dependence from our cameras to actually get them into our working space. Once it gets here, that was never a problem, but when it gets out of this space, it becomes a problem. So now I've actually profiled my monitor. So now that part of the equation is correct. And as long as I'm only doing this part, if you never printed anything else out, your work is done. You have your color managed workflow. But if you want to actually then do printer, to actually print something out, we need to profile the printers that you're actually using. And it's not just the printers, it's the ink set and the particular paper that you're using. So for instance, if you're using one of those Canons out there and you profile the printer for, let's say, I don't know, a Canon luster paper, it will work great for that. But if you go to an Epson luster, it completely throws that off. You have to have another profile for an Epson luster. That's why when you go in and look at printer profiles, for any of you who have, they're exhaustive. There's hundreds, if not thousands of them. It's because every single printer is unique. Every single paper plays into that uniqueness. And then the ink set, because you can change ink sets. You can use third-party inks. If you do, those have to be profiled. They're different than the inks that you would get from Epson or Canon or whoever. Make sense? Are there questions about any of this? Are we good? Woo, finally. Let's do something fun in this class. All right. I need everybody to, oh, let me kill the rest of those lights. Okay, so let's check and make sure we're doing okay in here. Yep. Okay, so in Photoshop, again, I just need to create a synthetic file, just a blank file to do some work in. So for me, it's Command N, brings up the new file dialog box. If you don't want to remember that, file menu down to new, does the same exact thing. In terms of the size, again, I typically work on the same size files all the time. So I'm going to change my drop-down menu here from pixels to inches. If yours is already at inches, you can just leave it there. If yours is on points or picas or whatever, this is just the increments of measurement. For the width, I'm going to put in 10. Hit the tab key to go to my height. I'm going to put in 8. I'm just making an 8 by 10. Hit the tab key again. We're going to make it a little bit higher resolution. I'm going to do 300 pixels per inch. Make sure that the color mode of this is RGB color and it is in 8-bit. I'm not so concerned about your background color, and then simply say OK. And it'll create just a blank file that we can actually do some work in. Again, if I want this file to resize as big as it can be but still show me everything, simply double click on the hand. It's now as big as this whole part can possibly be, and we are going to talk about selections today. We're going to go through a lot of the selective processes, and then I'm going to show you probably ways that you have never thought about making selections before. So that's pretty much what we're going to go with. But I want to start out with the hardcore guys, and so they are at the very top in your tools palette. The very first icon at the very top of your tool palette on the left-hand side is actually the Move tool. That's not what I'm interested in. It's the one that's right underneath it. If you click on that, this is the Marquee Tool. Again, it is a flyout menu, so you can have the rectangular Marquee Tool, the elliptical Marquee Tool, a single row, and a single column. Now, some of yours may be abbreviated. A lot of times now, some of you I don't think have single row or single column. That part doesn't really matter. As long as you've got the rectangular Marquee Tool or the elliptical Marquee Tool, those are the two that we really need. Does anybody not have those? Okay, so grab the rectangular Marquee Tool to begin with, and I want you to simply come out under the middle of your screen, click and drag out. And you get the little marching ants, and I don't care what shape you really make, you just get the little marching ants. But then I want you to come away from that, come to a different place on there, and simply click and drag out again. And you'll notice that the behavior of the tool is always to get rid of the selection that was there and give you a brand new selection. And for a lot of things, a lot of times that works out really well. However, if you want to add to a selection, you want to keep the one you have going, but add to it, you add the Shift key. So hold down the Shift key and now click and drag, and you can see you can do multiple selections. You can continue this process anytime you have selections that intersect one another, they will combine. To subtract from a selection, you use the Option key. So if you click on the Option key, and you'll notice when I do, I'm going to click on the Shift key again, you'll notice that that little plus, my cursor icon for where the selection starts, has no little additional symbol with it. But when I add the Shift key, it becomes a little plus. When I add the Option key, it becomes a little minus. That's just a visual indication to tell you that it's either going to add to the selection or subtract. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and click and drag, and you'll see that it takes things away. You can do subtract from inside of a selection. You can click and create sort of like donut holes, all of that kind of stuff. So this is basically what we have going here as a selection. Now, I want to talk about anyway, I'm going to leave that part as it is right now. Hit Command D will actually do a complete deselection. This also works with most of the selection tools is this. If you click and drag out again, if you want to have a square, you actually, once you've actually clicked or started to click and drag whatever, hold down the Shift key. And that will now restrict your selection so that your selection is the width is always equal to the height, which means by definition it is a square. Command T to deselect. How many of you have rulers showing on the edges? It'll be on the top edge and the left edge of your bar. How many don't? You need to always have your rulers showing. To get them to show, come up to the View menu and come down and put a check mark next to the word that says rulers, and you will get them. You only need them on the top and the left-hand side. You don't need them on the other two sides. All the information that you need, you can actually get from there. We're going to create a reference point in our image. This is a non-printable reference point. It's just what they call guidelines. So if you come up to the ruler that is at the very top and you click on it and drag down, it will pull down a line. And actually, if you get really slow about the middle of your image, that line will actually snap to the middle. Not that you need to have it anyway. But if you let go, you'll see mine is in cyan. If you don't like the color of your ruler, it actually is dealt with in Preferences under under Guides and Grids. This is where you can actually change the color of your guide. You'll see that mine is cyan. So I would suggest you leave it at its default, but if you're working on an image that's dominantly cyan, you'll never see this thing, so it makes sense to actually change it. I'm also then going to pull another guideline out from the left-hand side. So just I've got a point in the middle somewhere. It doesn't have to be exactly the middle. I just wanted to show you this part. If you want to center your selection, hover your cursor over the center. We're going to do a square, but it's going to be centered on this. Hold down the Shift key, that will give us a square, and then hold down the Option key. That will then, instead of dragging your point from either the top left to lower right or the top right to the lower left, whatever, however you normally pull your selections out, this will actually grow the selection directly out from the point where you start. So if you click on the center point and now start to drag out, this square is now perfectly centered on that center point right in the middle. So it's simply a very quick way to actually do that, to actually make that orientation based on any given point that you have in your image. That part is actually really critical for us. Now, while we have a selection going, I want to talk about what this really means. So I'm going to ask you to hit the, not Command D, that will get rid of the selection, but just the D key alone. That sets your foreground and background colors to black and white, which we want. I want black to be your foreground color so that you can actually see this. If white is your foreground color, simply hit the X key. That flips the background and foreground colors. If you want to do it repeatedly, just keep hitting the X key. They will just continue to flop one another. This is true of any foreground and background color you have. Ours, because we hit the D key, we have black and white. But if they were, say, red and green, it would just flip those guys as well. Then I want you to grab a brush. Hit the B key to get a brush. Again, the minute you hit a B key, the minute you hit any tool key, your eye needs to come up to the options bar that's up at the very top. The thing that I'm actually looking for, again, you can ignore the house and the little brush icon against this all the time. Well, for the most part, we're never really going to get into those. But the edge quality of your brush is what's controlled by the next one. You'll see there's a little number under here. Mine says 200. Yours can say anything. That's just the size of your brush in pixels. But what's important is this is where we control the edge quality. So if you click on your drop-down menu there, you will see that you can change your brush from 100% hard. You'll see this is the 200 pixels in the size of the brush. You can change the hardness of your brush. If your brush is 100% hard, it means it's a completely hard edge. If you drag that brush hardness all the way to the right, down to 0% hardness, that's an extremely soft brush. If you bring it right in the middle at 50%, that splits the difference between the completely hard edge brush and the completely soft edge brush. So you can really control how hard or soft the brush is. I'm going to actually ask you to crank it all the way up to 100%. And then again, we need to get rid of this flyout menu. The drop-down menu that we've got, we need to get rid of that, but I don't want to actually use my brush on my image, because if I do click on my image, it will actually paint on my image. It'll get rid of the flyout menu, but it will do something to my image. I don't want that to happen. So simply come up and click on the word Adobe. That flyout menu will go away, and we haven't really done anything to the image. Now, make sure that your blending mode of your brush is set to normal, that it's 100% opacity, 100% flow. Don't worry about the smoothing or the angle or any of that right now. And then I want you to, I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger by using the bracket keys just to the right of the P key. The key of opening bracket that's immediately next to the right of the P key itself makes my brush smaller. The key to the right of that, the close bracket, makes it larger. So I'm going to make it just a little bit larger. And then I'm going to paint. I'm going to click and drag across this. And one of the most important things about this class from this point on, for the next 15, 14, 13 weeks, however long it is this principle that selections restrict what can happen in a given part of an image. So in this, we've got this selection is going on in this. It is saying that the only place that you can lay down pixels, the only place that this black brush can show up is inside the selection that has actually been made. And this is not true of just selections that are squares and circles and all that. This is true of all selections, no matter what has made them. This principle holds true. Now, most of you know this, and most of you will use it until we get into the really complex shit, and then everybody forgets this. So, if you've done this, hit Command Z to undo it. I want to invert this selection. Now, that is very different than inverting an image. If you invert an image, it goes from black to white and white to black. So here, I'll show you. Drag your line out through here again. If you hit Command I, everything gets inverted. In the selection, again, inverting just is also controlled in the selection. Does that make sense, everyone? If I hit Command Z to undo that, and then hit Command D to deselect, and now I hit invert, Command I, the entire image inverts. Again, the selection controls everything. If there is an active selection, the only thing that will change is what is inside that selection, no matter what it is. Yes? I'm going to go back in space. Where did I lose you? Okay, so right now I've got a selection that's got a black line in it and a white background. If I hit Command I, the only thing that changes is what's inside that selection, because that selection is saying, okay, fine, we'll invert, but we will only invert what is in the active selection. So if I hit Command Z to undo that to go back, and then I hit Command D to get rid of my selection, I no longer have the marching ants. And now when I hit Command I, it happens to the entire image because I have no active selection going on in there. Everyone good on this part? Command Z to undo that. We'll go back. I just want to fill my screen with white again. White is my background color. So it is Command Delete for people on Mac. It's Control Backspace for people who are on Windows. It simply fills with your background color, which was white. So we sort of start all over again. Yeah. Next thing down. Go back up to the Marquee Tool or the Square Selection Tool. Click on the drop-down menu and come down to the Elliptical Marquee Tool. Elliptical Marquee Tool works the same way. You drag and it'll pull out ellipses. If you want perfect circles, you add the Shift key. So it again, just like the rectangular marquee tool, it will actually give you the square. If you want to locate that circle immediately on the intersection of those two guidelines, hit Command D to get rid of the first one. Hold down the Shift key and the Option key and click on the intersection, and you will pull a perfect circle out around this guy. And it works basically the exact same way. In this case, if I use my fill for my foreground color, again, the foreground color is the Option key that's right next to the Command key on a Macintosh. It's the same on Windows. Hold that down and hit Delete, and it'll actually fill with your foreground color, and we actually get this guy. Hit Command Z to undo that. If you want to say, okay, I've pulled this selection, but the area that I really want to impact is not the active selection in the middle, but is everything else. Notice there are no other marching ants in this. But if you come up to the Select menu and come down to Inverse, this is not going to invert your image the way we saw with Command I. Command I took everything that was white and made it black, and everything that was black and made it white. This is not inverting the image. This is inverting the selection. Again, it's the Select menu. So watch what happens when you click on this. So again, Select menu to do Inverse, and all of a sudden you've got marching ants that are going all the way around the exterior of this, and the circle is still in the middle. But now if you fill this with black, again, Option Delete, you'll notice that the active area was the outside, not the inside. And you can go back and forth between these two forever. Everybody good on this part? Okay, Command D to deselect. Command Z to undo that, Command D to deselect, or just hit Command D to deselect. And again, to fill with white on our the whole entire thing with white, hold down the Command or Control key and hit Delete or Backspace, and it will fill it actually with white. Next tool down, the lasso tool. So again, it's got a drop out down menu. There's a lasso tool, a polygonal lasso tool, and a magnetic lasso tool. So I'm going to grab just the regular lasso tool and bring it out on your keyboard, and you can simply draw selections freehand, and that part works out really well. The same control keys work. If you start a completely different selection, the first one goes away. The second one is actually then in place. If you want to add to the selection, you hold down the Shift key and you can add to them. If you want to subtract from a selection, hold down the Option key and you can actually get rid of stuff like that. You can actually do donut holes, so you can hold down the Option key and take stuff out of the middle. If I was going to fill this selection with black right now, again, I've got an active selection going, but the hierarchy of this is established the fact that what is in this selection is going to be the area outside of the donut hole, but restricted with inside the exterior. Again, to see that, hold down your Option key and hit Delete, and you'll see that that's how it gets filled. Again, Command Z to undo that. If we do an inverse of this selection, so up to the Select menu and down to Inverse, and then fill that with black, you'll see what ends up happening. Again, black is my foreground color, Option Delete or Option Backspace. So you can see that this is basically the way selections are actually working. And it's just important to realize that they control everything in here. So anyway, Command Z or just Command D to deselect, and then again, because white is my background color, Command Delete will actually fill it, and I can start over again. I need you to open a file for me really quickly. So come into session 3 of our assignment folders. And inside of session 3, there is a thing called gradients, just gradients, not gradient version 2, but just gradients. I want you to double click on that. It'll open it up. The original file that we made, you can actually close it up. We don't need to keep it open or work with it anymore. I'm actually going to, so basically it's a gradient with a red line in the middle of it. I'm going to double click on the hand to get it as big as I can possibly get it. And so we are going to look at the automated tools right now for doing selections. It's the next group down. So in the next group down, underneath the, I take it back. We'll do the polygonal tool and the magnetic lasso tool as well. So go back to the lasso tool, come down to the middle one, the polygonal lasso tool, and say OK to that. With a polygonal lasso tool, it's really designed to do straight lines. So if you click once and simply let go of your mouse and move to a different part of your image, you'll see there's a straight line that connects it. Click again. It'll actually put down another point. Come down to the bottom, click again, come over to the side, click again, and then if you come back up and you get really close to your original point where you started, you'll see that their cursor changes to look like it's basically an indication that you're going to complete the selection. And click on it and it will actually give you this line. The problem with this tool is that there's things that'll do it much better than this. I think a pen tool works much better than this, guys. If you don't know about the pen tool, don't worry, we get into it in depth in this class. But at any rate, this is basically the way the tool actually works. If you hit Command D to deselect and you actually do another one really quickly, so I'm just going to drag out one more, and I'm going to come down here. I've only done 2 lines of a triangle. If at this point you simply double click really fast, it will complete the line. It will bring it wherever you are back to the origin point to finish your selection. And it's basically how the whole tool works. Command D to deselect. The next tool down is the magnetic lasso. And the magnetic lasso is a brush. You can actually see that it's, they don't control it like a real brush. They've got feathering right here, and this feathering right here really has more to do with the hardness of the brush, so I don't know why they don't use that, but they don't. Anyway, I'm going to make mine a little bit larger using the bracket keys because it is a brush. And this is basically the way the tool works. I'm going to come down. I'm not going to start right on the red line. I'm going to start a little bit above it, so look at my screen to see where I'm at. I'm going to click and drag down, and I'm going to come down to where the red line meets the gradient. And slowly I'm going to start dragging along here, and you can see what happens is it actually does a reasonably good job at finding an edge, and it's laying down points, and these points actually function the same way as points from the pen tool will function. And as long as you actually continue to drag along this thing, it actually works out pretty well. But if you drop down into the middle of the red, you'll see that it starts looking for shit that it can't really find. This was the very first tool in Photoshop. This goes back quite a ways. It was the very first tool in Photoshop that could actually sense edges. A tool that could sense edges. There's a lot of software in here that could find edges different ways. But this was the first of the real tools that allowed you to sort of direct it. And it's sort of how it works. There's much better tools for this. I don't know anybody who uses this tool. But nonetheless, if you come back to your original point again, you get that same weird looking little icon, click on it, and you've actually got an active selection going again. So Command D to deselect. The next tool in that drop-down menu is, that's the last one. Make sure that now that you've done this, go back to your lasso tool. If you leave it on your magnetic lasso tool, these tools are sticky. That'll stay that way until you change it again. And like I said, nobody uses that tool, so we need to get rid of it. The next group that I want to go down to is the automatic selection one. So this is where the quick selection magic wand and the object selection tool are. Again, you may have different ones in here. The only 2 that you need to have in here are the quick selection tool and the magic wand. Everybody got that? All right, I want you to start with the magic wand. Click on this guy, and the first thing that we need to do is change the sample size. If you look up at your options menu again, by default, Adobe actually sets the sample size as point. Nobody uses point. Point samples are too specific. In every Photoshop file that exists, every digital file that exists, there are 2 anomalies that exist. One's called a hot pixel and one's called a dead pixel. A hot pixel will be perpetually white. It will never be anything else, no matter what you do to the image. It's an anomaly in the file. It will always be white. A dead pixel is the opposite. It will always be black no matter what. They're impossible to see unless you're looking at your image at a pixel level, but they are not impossible to hit. So the reason you use a 3x3 as opposed to a point sample is that what is going to happen now is if I make a selection somewhere in my image, instead of actually selecting a single pixel, it's going to select an area of pixels that is 3 pixels wide by 3 pixels tall. It's 9 pixels in all. It takes that, it averages all of that, and that's the selection that's actually made. And for most cases, it's a much better tool for us to actually use. This tool will actually also impact all of the other sampling tools. So this will change your eyedropper, will also sample 3x3 if you set it up here. Any of the other tools that are actually done on this, it will use this 3x3. It's a really good thing. It's a normal place where most people will stay. There are occasions where we will actually bump this up even higher. So you can see you can actually go all the way up to 101 by 101 pixels. That selects a very big sample area, but 3 by 3 is sort of the sweet spot and where I'm going to suggest you guys actually stay. But please, if you ever notice that this thing is changed back to point sample, change that. Point sample will cause you a world of hurt. Tolerance, I'm going to show you what tolerance is right now. We'll talk about that in just a second. So leave it at 32 right now. That is actually the standard. I'm going to leave on anti-erase. We'll talk about what that is. And also contiguous is going to be selected here as well. We'll talk about what all of those guys are. This is a gradient at the very top. If you take a look at your info palette, if you put your cursor all the way on the left-hand side and take a look at the info palette, you get RGB readings of 0, 0, 0. If you come up here in the middle, you get into the middle. In this case, I managed to just land right on middle gray, which is 127, 127, 127. And then all the way up at the far end, where it's white up here at the very end, you get the 255, 255, 255. So that's just to give you a sense that this gradient is our entire 256 tones from black 0 to white 255 and everything in between. That's what's really going on here. However, we can get a readout on this as well, which is what I want to do. So I want you to hover your cursor over to the point where you get a readout of 100, 100, 100. It's just the easiest way to actually figure out what's going on here. And click once. And you should get a square that actually happens like this. This is the magic wand tool. And what I want you to do is we are going to jump this square to its own layer. Hit Command J. And you'll notice in your layers palette, you won't really see any change here because we've still got the background layer that's on. But if you actually take a look at the layers palette, you'll actually see that it's actually made that selection and it's actually copied and pasted it to its own layer. If you turn the bottom layer off, you'll actually see you've just got a square that's going up here on the edge. Now, if we zoom into the edges of this square, this is what anti-aliasing is all about. What anti-aliasing tries to do, you see how jagged this edge is compared to actually the edge at the bottom? This jagged edge is a way that Photoshop will try to softly blend this edge into whatever is next to it. That's what anti-aliasing is actually all about. It's about actually, the problem we have with digital work is pixels are square. So imagine every single image that you make is a series of blocks that are stacked on top of one another. It is very hard to get a smooth edge against little blocks. Take a look at my whiteboard. You won't see this on the video, but you will see it here. So if I want to make a pyramid with pixels, it ends up looking like this. Sorry. Does that make sense? I'm trying to draw a pyramid. Pyramids shouldn't look like this. They shouldn't have this stair-stepping. They should actually be smooth like this. So what anti-aliasing does is it throws these random set of pixels in. At the pixel level, you can see it, but at the more pulled back, looking at the whole image version of it, you don't see the stair-stepping. That's what anti-aliasing is all about. If you hover your cursor now over this very far side over here, so I'm on the lightest side of all of this, what you'll actually see in your readout is 133. My tolerance was 32. So what happens with the Magic Wand tool is you say to it, I'm going to target an area. I'm going to pick an area. I picked 100. It will then give you whatever your tolerance is. It will add that value to where you picked, and it will subtract it both to give you a much larger range. So I selected 100. If you add 32 to 100, you get 132. Because of the anti-aliasing and also the 3x3 sample point, I'm actually getting 133, but I'm really close. If I go to the opposite end, the dark edge of this, whatever, I'm getting down to 67. Again, 32 minus 100 minus 32 is actually 68, but this is close enough. That's what tolerance is doing here with the Magic Wand. It's saying, okay, I'm going to select everything in there that's at 100, the tone of 100, but then I'm going to add 32 and subtract 32, and I'm going to give you that entire broad selection. But it does it, and it's really solid. It actually gave me that selection, and then it cuts off like that. There is no easing out of this selection. It's an incredibly hard line, and there are times where that works great. That's what you want. But most selections that we will make, you don't want to be this specific, because this looks like it's been cut out with a ruler and an X-Acto knife. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. I am going to double click the hand again to drop back out. I'm going to throw this thing. I'm going to actually leave this guy right here. I'm going to just call it Magic Wand. And then 32, just to give me a note that there was a tolerance of 32 in there, just to help me remember. I'm going to turn on the background layer again. I'm going to select the background layer again. And now we're going to change something in here. I'm going to go to the Magic Wand tool again. So Magic Wand. I'm going to leave everything set as it is, but I'm going to uncheck this contiguous. And unchecking the contiguous, you'll see what it actually does. I'm going to find that 100 in my readout again, one more time, so that I click exactly the same spot that I did before. And I'm going to click again. And now this time what you see happens is that it not only selected the top, but it selects everything in the image that falls within this tonal range. So I've got the selection on the top and the bottom as well. They do not need to touch one another. That's what contiguous means. Contiguous means says, okay, wherever you select this, I will give you the point that you selected. I will give you the full range of the tolerance. But if there's anything else in your image that's not actually physically touching this, I'm going to leave that alone. If you want everything to be selected, then you actually uncheck that contiguous part, and you'll get selections anywhere in the image where that happens. Now, a lot of people would say, well, that should, the red line should fall into that range. If you come over put your cursor right over the red line and look at your readout, you've got a 255 red, 0 green, and 0 blue. That does not fall anywhere in the range of 68 to 132. None of those numbers fall in there, so it is not selected. Make sense? Command D to deselect. Click on the middle of the red bar. No better way to make a selection of a solid graphic object in Photoshop than the Magic Wand. It is a perfect selection, and that's how long that took. That's how hard that was. Hit Command J to jump that to its own layer. Turn off the background layer, and you will see it is actually a perfect razor sharp edge of this. It doesn't get any easier. It doesn't get any better. A lot of people, Magic Wand is a very old tool. A lot of people dismiss it. You should not dismiss it. For what it does, it can actually do amazing things. Okay, I'm going to throw away the layer that I just made, the bar by itself. I'm going to turn on the background layer again, double clicking on the hand again to actually zoom all the way back out. I'm still on my background layer. Next tool down. Now we've actually talked about using this next tool down, and as soon as I have a chance to grade what you guys have turned in, we will talk about quick selection tool, refining edges, and that kind of stuff. That'll all happen next week. But I want to go to the quick selection tool right now to begin with. The quick selection tool, again, what it does is it finds edges. And what we said again last time when we were actually making the selection of the sky where it met the horizon line, that you do not want this tool to touch the edge you want it to find, because then it'll start looking beyond the edge. So I want it to find the selection for the very top. That's all I really care about it doing. So I'm going to click and start to drag out. It uses artificial intelligence to anticipate what it thinks I really want to do. So it completes the entire selection of the top gradient before I have anything to say about it. It's just done it. And that's great if that's what I ultimately want to have happen. Unlike, though, all the other selection tools, you'll notice in the middle of the brush, it's a permanent plus in here, meaning I'm going to start another selection for the gradient that's on the bottom. Now, so far, all the other selection tools have actually gotten rid of the original selection when I began a new one. That does not happen with the quick selection tool. So I'm going to click down here, and now I've got both of these selections actually going. If I hit Command Z to undo that part, you can actually use this tool to reduce. you'll notice that there's icons up at the top, and by default, the very first one, which is a way you would use the quick selection tool to work like a normal selection tool, whereas, well, here, I'll just show you. Hit Command D to deselect. Select the very first of the icons. Now the tool has no little icon in the middle of it. The brush has no icon. It had a permanent plus in there before. If I click and drag out now, it actually gives me that selection. However, you'll notice it changes to the plus icon at the top. If I go back to the original one, the icon that's all the way on the left, and make it work like a normal selection tool would, and click and drag out, you'll see that the original selection goes away, and then the new one actually is actually run. It's just to understand that that's how the tool works. This too is actually controlled by using the Option key. So if you hold down the Option key and click and start to drag out a line along, you'll notice that eventually, very quickly, it gets rid of the entire selection. Again, the tool it uses artificial intelligence to try to anticipate the move that you're actually trying to make. So the tool works really well for certain things, not so well for other things, but that's basically how this guy works. Are there questions about this guy right now? About any of this so far? Most of you guys know a lot of this. That part's great. This is something you might not know. I want to go back to the Marquee Tool. So again, up to the very top. The keyboard shortcut is the M tool. I want you to get the square marquee, and I want you to simply click and drag out a square that's here in the middle. The selection menu offers a lot of things to us that are incredibly important. How many people in this room have ever saved a selection? Well, that is now going to be pretty much anything that takes you longer than 20 seconds to do as a selection. You're going to save it for the rest of your life. There's no point in actually having to do something twice. So I'm going to come up. I've just got the square drawn out. First things first, though, I'm going to click on the select menu to get my drop-down menu. We've already gone over inverse and what that is. If you click on inverse, you'll see you get the marching ants around the entire exterior. The square is still in the middle, but what is really selected now is what is outside of that central rectangle. That's what's actually really active and going on here. If you hit that invert again, it goes right back to the original square that's actually in the middle. You can go back and forth forever just inversing these guys. The next grouping down, I want to go through this whole menu because there's a lot of things in here that actually matter to us. The next group down has to do with layers and finding layers and doing all layers. I don't use this stuff, but it actually exists in here. You can actually click on this drop down and you can actually do some searching that actually happens in here as well. Again, this is not something that I use a lot. This seems like Photoshop is just trying to pack features in that nobody really uses. But nonetheless, that's what's going on in here. We're going to leave color range to later, focus to later, subject and sky both to later. We are going to leave some select and mask to later. Modify, we actually do want to talk about right now. It's to be the easiest place to see it. So with modify, before I use modify, I'm actually going to do a selection. I'm going to jump this again to its own layer. So I've just got a square going down here. At your options palette, you need to make sure that your feathering is set to 0, that your style is set to normal, and we're going to jump this to its own layer, Command J. Turn off the bottom layer, and actually you can turn off the magic wand layer too so that we can really just sort of see what's going on here. So I've got the square that's actually sitting right here, and you can see that the edges are extremely hard and sharp. So I'm going to rename this layer, and I'm going to call it Feather 0. Then I want to load this selection. I want to do this exact same process again, but I want to load this as a selection. The easiest way, and this is something every one of you should write down right now because you're going to hear me say this a million times for every class that we go from now on out. The easiest way to take something, a layer, a channel, a path, anything like that, and turn it into a selection is to, on Macintosh, you hold down the Command key and you click on the thumbnail of it. On Windows, you hold down the Control key. And what I mean is this. I want you to hover over the icon, the thumbnail of this layer that we're actually on right now. So I'm just hovering over that guy, and you'll see you get a little hand. Now, you don't need to select the layer. You just need to hover over the thumbnail. That's the big trick to this. And then add either the Command key or the Control key. And you see when you do that, it'll add a little sort of marching ant square to the bottom part of the hand. And now if you click on it, it will load that selection automatically. So now without going in here and trying to duplicate that selection using the Marquee tool or any other way to do it, I simply have loaded this selection, works great for me. I'm going to go back down now and turn on the eyeball of my background layer and select the background layer. So what I'm trying to do now is I just want to select this again and actually modify the selection and jump it again so you can see what the difference really is. So come up to the select menu, come down to modify, and we're going to start down at the very bottom, feather. So we have no feathering in this when we made the selection. Remember, our feathering was set to 0, but you can feather after the fact. So again, up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather, and I'm going to put in a feathering pixel of, let's just put in 20 pixels and say OK.
I lost you when you were about to click the control onto the
OK, so do you have an active selection going? Then hover your cursor over the second layer that we made. Here, I'll do it with you, hang on. Hover over that, hold down the Command key or the Control key, and just click on the thumbnail, and it will load it as a selection. Oh, let me see. No, Command key. And now click on it.
Oh, that wasn't showing.
Just the thumbnail.
Okay.
Got it?
Thank you.
So then go back to your background layer and turn it on, turn background layer visibility on and make it active. Because we want to jump from the background layer. We want to always, we're going to be doing all of these from the background layer. So up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather, and put in 20 pixels and say OK. You'll notice that the corners actually get softened here, but we're going to jump this to its own layer, Command J. And then again, turn off the background layer and also turn off the feather 0 layer, and you can see what's actually happened. It's as if we softened up the selection when we actually made it. And so this is what feathering is actually all about. Does this make sense, everybody, what we just did and what feathering is all about? But you need to understand this too. I'm going to load this as a selection again, just this part, Command click onto the thumbnail. I want to put a blank layer up on the very, very, very top. So I'm going to select my Magic Wand layer on the very top. At the bottom of your layers palette, right next to the garbage can is a square with a little plus in it. That's how you add a new blank layer. So I'm simply going to add a new blank layer to this. Then I'm going to turn the eyeball off on everything. So I've just got my top layer is selected. I've got the marching ants on it. It is the feathered version of this. I'm going to go back to the B key, my brush, and again, I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller so that I can paint across this. My foreground color is still black, and I'm simply going to do a swipe through this. And the reason that I'm showing you this is that selections actually can have gradients in them. So when we feathered this selection, what we were saying was that this whole area in here is not completely selected. This area in the middle is totally selected, and that's why I get a pure black in here. But as I start to go out to the edges here, the amount of being selected is decreasing to the point where I finally get out here onto the very edge where it's no selection at all happening out here. That's what feathering is actually doing. Does that make sense to you guys? Or is everybody good on that part? OK, Command D to deselect. You can throw this guy away. I want to go back down to, again, the very bottom layer, make it active, and actually turn its eyeball on. I want to select that feather 0 one more time. Actually, I'm going to change the layer name of the very soft one to feather 20. It's really smart in this class to actually get in the habit of naming your layers, naming your channels, naming your paths, all of that kind of stuff. In your mind, as you're working from day to day, you can remember everything. But if you go away from something for 2 or 3 weeks, good luck. If you go away from something for 6 months or a year and you come back to it, you're just going to look at it and go, what the fuck did I do there? I have no idea. Naming your layers will give you some sense of what's really going on and what you ended up doing. So I'm going to go back down to, again, my bottom layer is actually the active layer. It's highlighted, it's visible. I'm simply going to hover over my feather 0 thumbnail. I'm not going to click on the eyeball. I'm not going to click on the layer. I'm just hovering over the thumbnail. The trick to doing this is that command click works on thumbnails. It does not work on the layer. So if you hover over the layer name or any other part of it and do that, again, if you look at this right now, I'm holding down my command key. I don't get that little extra marching ant guy on there. But if I hover over the thumbnail and hold it down, I do. And you can make a selection regardless of whether the layer is visible or not. You'll notice I didn't make the selection, I didn't make the layer active. It just loaded this thing as a selection. So back up to the select menu, down to modify. We're going to go through the rest of these, and we don't even have to jump these. You'll actually see what's going on. I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. So I'm going to start, we've already looked at feather. We know what feather is. I'm going to go to contract. And in contract, I'm going to put in 20 pixels as well and say OK. And you'll notice that it just sucked everything in by 20 pixels. It does it by 20 pixels all the way around. Hit Command Z to undo that. And you can hit Command Z. You can go back and forth to really see what it was actually doing. So just contracting pixels, that's all it does. Back up to, so I'm back to my original selection, up to the select menu, down to modify, expand the next one up. And we'll also put in 20 pixels for that and say OK. And you'll see that my image jumps out and it expands it by 20 pixels. But what you'll also notice is it's clipped the corners. And the reason it's clipped the corners is this, is that if we go back to, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Really quickly, I'm going to trace the outline of my box using guides. We have an active selection. Guides will actually snap to active selections. So come up to your ruler at the very top, click on the ruler and drag down. And as soon as you get your guideline close to that top marching ant edge, it will snap into place and you can let go. You can then do the same thing again, top ruler. I'm going to pull down a second guideline and snap it to the bottom. I'm going to then come over to the left and drag over my vertical guidelines so that I'm just outlining the edge so that I have a reference of where I was. And now I'm going to do expand. So up to the select menu, down to modify, down to expand. Again, 20 pixels here. What's happening here, take a look at my screen. I'm going to zoom into this area really quickly right here. What's happening here is that it's actually 20 pixels from this line up to the top is 20 pixels. From this side line, again, these were my original lines, my original edges. Out here, it's 20 pixels. But from the intersection out here is also 20 pixels. And that's why this edge gets clipped off. So it's not everything goes out the way you would expect it to go out. Does this make sense to everyone, what's happening here? Okay, it's just, as we go along in all of these, I'm going to point out the things that you think should work that don't work, why they don't work. Because then if you understand why they don't work, you'll never forget that they don't work and we will be in good shape. Okay, let's see. I'm going to hit Command D to deselect again. Sorry. Double click on the hand to kick back out. Command D gets rid of that selection. To get rid of your guidelines, because they become really confusing, come up to the View menu and come down to Clear Guides, almost at the bottom. It'll get rid of those blue guys. If you were to actually print that file out, those are non-printing characters, so even though they'll be visible on your image on your screen, they will not print out. If you then go ahead and save your file and send it to someone else, if it's a Photoshop file, they'll be in there. If it's a TIFF file, they'll be in there. But if you make a JPEG or a PNG or something else out of it, whatever, the guidelines will not be in there. So just so that you know, they're non-printing. They're for reference only. Last one. Again, hover over the thumbnail for the feather 0, hold down the Command or Control key and click to load that as a selection. It's the last of the groups in the modify, so come down to the modify again. It's up at, we'll go to the smooth. So what smooth does, you can go ahead and click on smooth, and I'm going to put in 20 pixels for smooth. And watch what happens in this guy right here. So in smooth, you'll notice that the edges on the very top bottom, well here, we should actually, let's go back in time. Hit Command D to deselect. Look at your history palette, and I want you to go back. You will see a place in your history palette where we clicked on Clear Guides. Go to the step right before that, back in history. I want to just bring our guides back, and it was easier to just do it that way. Now I'm going to load the selection of feather 0 again. So hold down either Command or Control, click on the thumbnail. It loads as a selection. and then up to the select menu, down to modify and smooth. And we've got a 20 pixel border in here, smooth, and you can see that what smooth does is it doesn't actually change the height or the width of the sides, but what it does is it takes any point and rounds it off. That's what smoothing is all about. Now this is also true when you use smoothing in the select and mask workspace. If you guys haven't gotten there, don't worry, we'll get there in this class as well. But smoothing is about taking discrete angles and smoothing them out. It doesn't have an impact against anything that already is smooth. These sides were already smooth, but the jump from a vertical line to a horizontal line is considered a point, and it knocks that point off. And the more you increase the smoothing, the deeper that roundness will actually go. Does that sort of make sense, everyone? Okay, Command D to deselect that. What else have I got in here? Oh, I know. Double click on the hand to get rid of that. Let's get rid of our guides again. So again, to get rid of the guides, up to the view menu, down to clear guides. They're now gone. I want to load the feathering one more time, so I'm going to come up to feathering. I'm going to hold down the Command key and load this as a selection. You can modify selections the same way you can modify images. However, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that because I'm going to transform this selection right now. They think that transform actually happens in the edit menu, and you'll see if you come up to the edit menu and you look down here that the free transform, none of these are available to us. However, if you come up to the select menu, they are. Transform selection. So I want everybody to come up here to transform. You will see when you do that, you actually end up getting a series of control handles that sit on this, and they allow you to do all sorts of things. So for instance, I can grab the handle that's in the very top and I can drag it down, and this actually modifies my selection. So if you're having trouble really getting a selection to be where you want it to be, this is the easiest way to do it. You can also click in the middle and move the entire selection around, and you'll see the marching ants actually go with it. You can bring your cursor on the outside and you get a double-headed arrow, so it allows you to rotate your selection. So all of these things are options that you actually have for you. But for me, the one that becomes the most interesting is if you look up at the very top of the screen, and you will actually see there is a circle with a line through it, and when that circle with a line through it means you want to undo the transform. So if I click on it, you'll see I don't get rid of the selection, but I do get rid of the transform. So I'm going to come back up to the select menu and back down to transform selection. If we do make a change in it, so let's say for instance I grab a corner and pull it in, that then the check mark will actually then go ahead and do the transform. The transform, it'll actually happen to it. I don't want that to happen right now, so I'm going to hit Command Z, will actually undo just the transform, but I still have the transform control lines around this. Again, if you want to get rid of those, you click on the circle with the line through it. But look at the little icon that's right next to it. I don't know what this thing ever was supposed to look like. It looks like a graph that's being bent to me. I don't know. But at any rate, if you click on that, this is also a transform. If you do a lot of transforming using your image, this is the warp transform tool. That's what this really is. In this tool, you actually have handles that control and can change a lot more of the shape other than just make it taller, make it shorter, make it wider, make it narrower, whatever. These control handles, I'm going to ask you to don't start in the very corner. Grab one of the two that's at the very top in the middle. I'm going to grab the one that's sort of, it's not going to be the far right-hand corner, but the one that's just to the left of that on the very top line. If you click on that and drag it up, you will see you get a control that will allow you to reshape the entire selection, and you can make really, really specific selections tailored to very, very specific shapes doing this. So you think that the only way to get a really good solid selection is to use the pen tool. That's not necessarily true. Look at the shape that I've actually created in this to go ahead and say, yep, this is exactly what I want. Click on the check mark and you've got this really warped selection that you've actually got going here. This thing works great for a lot of, again, if you've got solid line graphics in an image that you want to make a selection of, but they've got curved edges or they've got something like this, this tool is fucking amazing. Are we good on this part? Okay, so we've gone to all this trouble to make this selection. We need to save it. So to save a selection, come up to the Select menu and come down to the very bottom where it says Save Selection, and it'll just open up. And I'm going to call mine Warped.
How did you get the blue dots to go away?
Hit the check mark at the very Options bar at the very top. And then up to the Select menu, down to Save Selection, and call it Warped. Or just whatever name you can give it so that you understand what it is. And go ahead and say OK. Hit Command D to deselect, and then come over to your Channels palette. This is why we keep the Channels palette visible. Click on the Channels palette and click on the scroll bar and come all the way down to the bottom and look down at the very bottom. And what you'll see at the very bottom of this is you've added what they call an alpha channel. It's not a channel that impacts your image. The channels that impact your image are the red, green, and blue channels. Actually, the composite at the very top, RGB, is not really a channel. It's an illusion. You cannot have color in a channel, and this is true of this channel. This is strictly, again, this is an illustration of what this is. To see what I really mean by that is try to throw it away. Grab that trail and try to throw it away. I'm grabbing the RGB channel. Try to grab the RGB channel and make a copy out of it by dragging it down onto the little icon. It works the exact same way that it works over in the Layers palette. You can't make a copy of it. That does not exist. However, if you grab the red channel and drag it down to that little square, it will make a copy of your red channel, and you'll see it sits down at the very bottom underneath the thing we just called Warp. If you take the red copy and throw it away, you're good to go. It hasn't changed or affected your image at all. But the trick to this is that we've actually saved a selection as warped. Now, we can load this as a selection. It's the same trick. Do not select the channel. Hover over the thumbnail, hold down the Command key or the Control key, and click, and it loads your warped selection. It comes right back again, and we can actually continue to work with this. But to take a look at what's happening, hit Command D to deselect, click on the warp to actually load it. You will see this is essentially a mask. It is a black and white part. It controls what is selected and what is not selected, and that's basically what you get. I want to actually go, does this make sense, everybody, what's going on here? Okay, I want to go back up to the very top, click on the RGB channel at the very top, even though it's not a channel. Click on this guy. I want to load the Feather 20 selection that we have that's sitting up on the very top. So again, do not select it, do not make it active. Just hover over the thumbnail of Feather 20, hold down the Command key and click. You will load it as a selection. And I want to save this. So come up to the Select menu, come down to Save Selection, and we'll call it Feather 20. And say OK. Hit Command D to deselect, and now go over to your Channels palette and scroll down to the bottom. You will see right underneath Warped is Feather 20, the selection you just made. If you click on it and look at it, you will see this functions essentially just like a layer mask would. Selections and masks are the same thing. They are interchangeable from one to the next. Does this make sense? To show you this, to make sure that you understand it, come back over, go all the way back up to the top again, click on your RGB guide to make it active, come over to your background, and again, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to load that selection, and then I'm going to treat it as a layer mask. So I need to make a copy of my background layer. So select the background layer, hit Command J to jump it. You've just copied and pasted the entire layer, so that's why it's made a copy of it. It's just a fast way of doing it. Turn off the eyeball for the bottom one because I want to be able to see the impact of this mask. So I've got two copies of my background layer. The bottom layer is turned off. The middle, the one just above it is active. You can see it's the highlighted layer. And then I'm going to come back over here. Again, I'm not going to select the channel. I'm hovering over the thumbnail of the Feather 20, and I'm going to Command click to load it as a selection. And then I'm going to add it as a layer mask on this background copy. To add it as a layer mask, we'll look at the icons that sit down at the very bottom of the Layers palette. You're looking for the rectangle that's got the black hole in the middle of it. That is, and you'll see if you hover over it, it gives you the little readout, Add Layer Mask. If you click on that, it has added a layer mask. Then you can see what has happened now is that the center of the mask, where things are completely white, are fully revealed. But as I'm moving out to the edges of this, there are shades of gray that are in that mask that are slowly making that selection part disappear out to the point where it's completely hiding the area out here on the outside. Does this make sense what's going on here? Who did I lose? Like half of you. So what about this? Did you at least get this? Is this what you're seeing?
No, I'm still on the copy the background.
That's okay. No, that's okay. So have you made a copy of the background yet? Just
Every time I do Command J,
yep.
it gives me the feather 20 and not the actual background.
So you need to select the background. So go all the way down here. I'll start it over and do it with you. So select the background, the very bottom. Is it highlighted?
Yeah.
Okay, then hit Command J.
It keeps giving me the different.
That's because you've got a selection going. You're jumping the selection. So hit Command Z to undo that. Hit Command D so that you do not have a selection.
Okay.
And then make sure that the bottom layer is selected, Command J, and you'll get the whole thing. Then again, hover over this feather warp, hold down the Command key, load it as a selection. But again, remember, look at what's going on here. In this selection, the area that is white is 100% selected. The area that is black is 0% selected. And then these grays in between are going from 100% selected to slowly going through to 0% selected. I don't have a hard edge there. I've got this gradation. This is a selection, but by gradation. Does that make sense? So when I use this as a layer mask over here on my copy, again, turn the eyeball on of this copy and actually add it as a layer mask. The part that is in the middle that was 100% selected is shown. The part that's on the far outside that was 0 selected is completely hidden, but the transition happens through this so that I do go from that complete to nothing. Are we good on this part? Okay.
I do have one question.
Shoot.
So when we were doing the transform the selection,
Yeah.
I noticed that something happened on my end that didn't happen on your end, which is it actually like altered like the actual like layer somehow.
No. We'll take a look after class.
I'm still lost over here.
Okay. No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine. You're fine. You're on the layer. This part's fine. You've got the selection going. Now you just need to add a layer mask. Click on that little icon.
I just lost my. Okay. And I turn this around. Here.
Yes. Boom. You selected the warped channel, not the feathered one, but still works. All right, I'm going to throw the layer mask away. So grab the layer mask. This is an important one. Grab your layer mask and actually throw it down in the garbage, and a dialog box will come up. And this happens all the time. I don't know where people learned this, but the worst habit that you guys have that I'm going to try to break is this. All of you, not all of you, a lot of you feel like, I'm going to cancel out of this for 1 second. You can see that this mask is actually doing its work, but the beauty of this is that the mask is non-destructive. If you hold down your Shift key and click on the mask, it hides it. You see it puts a big red X on it, it hides it. I've got my whole image is intact. This means that if something goes wrong a week later, a month later, a year later, and I think, oh fuck, I've got to change this thing, whatever, I don't need to worry about it. It was just the layer mask was controlling what I could see. But what so many of you have been taught, I just clicked on the X again to get rid of it. What so many of you have been taught is that you actually apply this layer mask. So that's what I'm going to show you right now. Drag the layer mask to the garbage, and you're going to have 3 options. You're going to have either delete the mask, which just gets rid of it, doesn't do anything to your image. Cancel, which means it just leaves it where it is right now. Or apply. And look what happens when you go ahead and click on apply, and look what happens. That is a destructive move. Those pixels are now gone forever. You can't get them back. And if you save this file, it's done. Why would you do this? There is no reason to do this. You get the exact same effect. Hit Command Z to undo that. The exact same effect to have the entire file intact, the entire pixel content intact, and let the mask do the hiding. This is non-destructive, whereas when you take it and drop it down here, you will see this in half the instructions that I give you, and I say, do not apply your layer masks, because that is destructive. Are we good on this part? Okay, I know this seems like a lot, but how many people in this room, there's a lot of fashion people, beauty people in this room, right? Sort of. How many people took this class because you wanted to learn how to select hair? Oh, be honest. If you're a beauty person and you're telling me you don't know how to select, hair doesn't drive you out of your mind, then you're not doing beauty. So at any rate, I'm just saying, we're going to get to that today. So I'm just holding out hope. I realize this seems really technical and whatever, but this is going to get us through and serve you well, I hope. So anyway, I'm going to hit don't save on that part. I'm going to close that image up. We're going to open up another one here really quickly. Yeah. So go back into your image, and I want you, there's you can close that one up. There's a second one I want you to pick called Gradients version 2. If you select this guy and open it up and double click on the hand. So in this, we can actually use a different selection tool. It is in the select menu. It doesn't happen, there's no tool for it over here. But if you click on the select menu and you come down to color range. Now when color range first opens up, you probably will see, yours may look somewhat different than mine, but for the most part, is your image still in color? Okay, well, that part's great. And then you'll notice that there's a small little area of the image that appears to be selected part, and then a fuzziness slider up at the top, and then there's a drop-down menu. So I just want to show you how this part works. We'll start at the drop-down menu at the very top, and in the drop-down menu, you can come down and you can actually pick the primary and secondary colors. So if you click on reds, you will actually see that there's a bar that is in the preview that runs across that's only selecting the red. Now, I find the preview to be really too small to do really accurate work. So if you use the drop-down menu under Selection Preview and you change it to grayscale, it will actually show it to you on your image. Now, it turns your image to grayscale, but at least you have a bigger idea of what's going on. Yes?
Where did you get color range from?
Where did I do what?
You said, where did you get that box?
Color range, so the Select menu,
Okay,
down to Color Range,
got it.
and then in the drop-down menu, reds. And then in the preview, grayscale. If you want to go back to your image, go back to none. You can actually change other things. There's a quick mask that'll allow you, it'll put it on. It's really hard to see a quick mask on red because that's red on red, whatever. But nonetheless, those exist. I don't ever use these, but I do use the big version of this because it makes it able for me to see it on the image. But I'm going to go back to none for the time being. Click on the drop-down menu again, and you can come down to greens. And you'll see it picks the greens, and then you can come down to blues, and it'll pick the blues and whatever. So that's pretty targeted. You can also do highlights. If you click on highlights, it will actually give a highlights. If you want to see what it looks like on your image, again, drop it down to do grayscale. And you can see it selects what it thinks are your highlights. You also have a fuzziness slider and a range. If you click on the range slider, you can actually control where highlights, you get to define highlights as opposed to Photoshop defining highlights. The fuzziness is the quality of this transition of the edge. You can see if you bring your fuzziness way up, it actually is a really smooth gradation that transitions from, again, remember, this is selection. Where it's white is going to be fully selected, where it's black will not be selected at all, and where it's actually transitioning through grays, it will be selected starting here, stronger, weaker, 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 to the point you get down here that there's nothing selected. So that's basically what's going on with fuzziness. And if you take your fuzziness all the way down to 0, you see basically you get that anti-lazed line again. And that's sort of like what's going on there. You can do midtones and shadows the same way. You can do skin tones. Skin tones here are pretty much strictly Caucasian and worthless. I'd never use this thing. I don't suggest you ever use it. There's no reason. I'm going to go back up to the very top, though, to sampled colors. And at sampled colors, this is a different guy altogether. Again, I'm going to go to my preview to be none so that I can sort of see what's going on. with sampled colors, you will see that you get actually a sample tool, and you can come over and so, for instance, you can click on the red, and it works a lot like the Magic Wand tool does. So again, it will actually does a really good job of selecting the red or any sort of, it finds those edges really, really well. But what I want to do is show you the difference in this and what the sort of Magic Wand does. We'll actually look at this part again. So I'm going to cancel out of here really quickly. We're going to do the Magic Wand trick one more time. So go back to the Magic Wand tool in your drop-down menu. So again, fourth tool down, right underneath the Quick Selection tool, grab the Magic Wand. At this time, I'm going to, again, hover over. I'm looking for that 100 point. I've still got a tolerance of 32. I'm going to click, and it actually gives me the same selection. This is exactly what we did before. I'm going to Command J to jump that to its own layer and take a look at it. And you'll see, again, it does a complete selection. The point was 100. It adds 32. It subtracts 32. It gives me a really hard edge. So I'm going to go back to my background copy now. My background layer, turn it, activate it again. But this time I'm going to do a similar thing using color range. So up to the select menu, down to color range. Again, I'm going to hover over this. Now you can see I'm still getting a readout up there. I'm going to change my fuzziness to 32 as well so that it is the same thing as I was using in the Magic Wand tool. Again, what this does is that when I click on 32, it's going to say, when I click on 100, it's going to say, okay, I'm going to select 32 more than that and 32 less. So I'm still going to get that range of 68 to 132. It's still going to be that same range, but there's a huge difference in what happens with this and the Magic Wand tool. So set your fuzziness to 32, hover over your gradient, and again, I'm looking at my info palette till I get the 100 and click. And you will actually see that you don't get marching ants, you get the preview that's sitting right down here on your screen. If you want to see what's really going on in your image, click on grayscale. You'll see that's what's really happening. But now at this stage of the game, I want to go ahead and make the selection. So go ahead and hit OK. You will still see that you get little boxes on both sides. We are going to jump this to its own layer as well. Command J. Turn off the background layer at the bottom. Turn off the Magic Wand at the top, and you will see that what happens with color range is very different than what happens with the Magic Wand. In the Magic Wand tool, it took that 100 point, it added 32 tones, it subtracted 32 tones, and it fully selects 100% of that area. So the area is entirely selected. There's no fall off in this at all. But if you turn off this and you look at the color range selection, what color range does is it selects the same area that was that 100 completely. 100% of 100 was selected. But as you start to move to 32, adding 32, so as I start going from 100 to 132, when I get, it fades. And it fades directly from 100% to 0%. So when I hit 133, it's no longer selected at all. And the same thing happens in the other direction. So it is a much more organic selection. It's a far better selection tool, and it's one that you'll end up using a lot in this class. Does that make sense, everyone, what's going on here? Okay. You can close this guy up. And we're really going to work on real images now. Yahoo. If I only had another hour. Okay, so I need everybody to go back to their Class 3 folders. Inside of there is a file called the Select and Mask Practice file. I need you to double click on that guy and say OK. And again, I'm going to double click on the hand. So it's basically a picture of a girl in profile on a top layer. And if you uncheck that, there's a beach at the bottom. Everybody got this guy? So this is going to be our first composite. And what I'm interested in doing is putting the girl on the beach. So I need to get rid of the background that's in the back. Make sure that you've got the hair layer is selected. So the hair layer actually is selected. You can get to select and mask a lot of ways, but the easiest way, the way I always do it, is using the select menu. So come up to the select menu and come down to select and mask. It will take you into a slightly different space. Some things look somewhat similar, but we are pretty much in a different place in Photoshop. I'm going to center this again in my image. Your image may not look exactly like mine, but I'm going to get it to in just a second. If you take a look on the right-hand side, the left-hand side, you've got a limited set of tools that run down the left-hand side. The one at the very top is the quick selection tool. The one right underneath it is the refine edge. The one underneath it is a regular paintbrush. The one underneath this is the object selection tool. The one under that is just the lasso tool. Then you have the hand that will allow you to move around, and then the zoom tool, the magnifying glass, to move in and out. On the right-hand side, on properties at the very top, you've actually got view, and I need you to start there. So the view has got a drop-down menu. I want you to click on it and come down to the onion skin. That's usually what comes on by default. The onion skin allows you to see both of your images as they're selected or not, but you need to put your transparency at 50%. If you take your transparency all the way up to 100%, you can only see the background. If you take it all the way down to 0%, you can only see the girl. But at 50%, you can actually see both, and this helps you to know what you have selected and what you haven't selected. There's also, well, we'll get to color and awareness range. So to use this tool, leave it on the onion skin, come over and pick the quick selection tool at the very top. Some people will actually start using the quick selection tool in Photoshop and then come into this. There's no reason. This is exactly the same tool. Now remember, we want to use this tool to select the girl, but we are looking at all these edges. You cannot let the tool touch the edge that you want it to pick. So I'm going to make my quick selection tool a little bit bigger using my bracket keys, and I'm going to stay away from this area here where the hair gets really fine and you've actually got background showing through. You do not want to touch that with the quick selection tool or it will select the entire background. So stay away from the edges, don't cross the edge here in the front. But when you click, you'll actually see as you start to move through this stuff that the area that comes selected of the girl is 100% visible now, and you can make a distinction between what did get selected and what didn't get selected because of the clarity. It's no longer onion skinned. The background still is, but look at the area that's up here in the top. You can see this is hair that was not added to that selection, but you can also see hair that was not added to the selection here. That's important for us to know, and the onion skin gives you that visibility. However, you can also see that background has been selected in these areas up in here. So we need to fix these problems. We need to fix where the background got selected. We need to remove that, but we also need to add the areas here where the hair was not selected. Does that make sense to everyone? You cannot use the quick selection tool to do that. Instead, you use the next tool down, the refine selection. It is also a brush. You can make it a little bit bigger, but this tool, and again, you don't want to use this tool anywhere you don't need it. Now, I can see that I need it in this hair, right in this area right here, but you do not want to paint this brush over this part of her head or this part of her face that's already been perfectly selected, because it will do damage to that selection process. But if you come up to the very top up here and you start to actually swipe this tool through the area, just brushing it down in all of the areas of the hair that actually need this, you can see that it actually starts to remove the background. As you continue over the middle, the hair that was not selected before actually is selected now. So I'm actually getting that hair. There is no strength slider on this. There's no reason to go back and forth over the same area. If you've gone over it once, the tool is doing everything it can do. I'm going to also fix the area that's in the back by brushing over all of it and just staying on the hair. Again, do not go down into the area of a hair that's already been perfectly selected, but you need to make sure you go over all of those hairs that are in the back that got missed by the quick selection tool. And this is now what I've actually got as selection, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. But to check, go back to your view menu, click on the drop down menu and come down to black and white, and you'll actually see the mask that's being made. Now I feel like I've still got a problem area right in here. This seems way too chunky in here for me. You can still use the refine edge tool in these areas while we're looking at that, and look how much better my mask is right now. It's actually still picking up a lot of blocking in there, but that actually might be a part of the image. But this is the mask that's actually been created for me. I feel like it's a pretty good mask. I'm going to go back to the onion skin, Things seem pretty well for me right now, so I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. I'm not going to do any of the radiuses, smart radius. I'm not doing any of this. I'm not doing any of the global. There are ways, much better ways of doing all of this work later that we will get to. I'm simply going to come down to the very bottom, to the output. And in the output part down here, if you click on this drop down, you can actually say you want to do this as a layer mask. You do not want to do this as a new layer, because a new layer will actually apply the layer mask. That is destructive, but a regular layer mask is just fine. And so I'm going to click on that and say OK. And this is now our composite. If you want to see what it actually looks like, I'm going to uncheck the background. You can see that's what the girl looks like. Check the background part right here, and this is how select and mask ultimately works. Are there questions about this? You what? You didn't select it. So go back in history to when you opened it. Fine. Go into select and mask. Good. Set this not at 0. Actually, go all the way up to the very top. No, this is a radius. This is a radius. Go all the way to the very top. Scroll up to the top. Make sure that that's 50%. You are on the onion skin. Select the top tool. Quick selection tool. Start in this area in here and select all of her body.
Oh, I just did her hair.
Yeah. That was your problem. You don't need to do it again, though. You know how it works. Questions about this? Okay. This is going to be a mad dash to the next part, but this is the best part. So get rid of that guy. So I want to open up Hair Fantasia. And this is where we leave off from where you guys most likely have ever been working before. So how do I select this girl? How would you guys go about doing it? Well, select and mask seem good. We just saw that. That would actually be a good try here. And you could try it. We're not going to try it here on our time because I know the results that you're going to get on this. But what I want you to look at or to think about is this. Take a look at your channels, your RGB channels over here on the side. And we've had this conversation before. The way Photoshop works is that there are masks in each one of those channels that control the amount of red, green, and blue light in a given area. So if you click on this red channel just to see it, what it's doing is it's actually holding back all this area of her hair that's really black. It's holding back all of that light so that you don't see a whole lot of the red in her hair. But you can see that the area of her skin is really light. So this is a mask. It's working just the way masks work. It's keeping all of the red out of her hair, but it's letting a ton of red into her face. If we click on the green layer, you'll see there's not a lot of green in a face, so it actually is darker. It's holding back more of that green. And then finally, if you come down to the blue is really, there's not a lot of blue in skin. So again, this mask is actually controlling this. So I want to separate this girl from the background. What is the best way I can separate the girl from the background? Don't have time to wait for the answer. I'm just going to tell you. It's a mask. It's a layer mask. It's what we want to do. If I can create the perfect layer mask of the girl, I can separate her and I can put in any different background that I want. Correct? So I want to build a mask with this girl. Select and mask tool helps me start that. Quick selection tool, maybe. Color range, maybe. But you've got to realize I've already got 3 masks in this image that are as good, if not better, than I'm ever going to be able to make with a selection tool. And it's in the channels. Right? So let's look at the channels. What I really care about is not so much the girl. I really care about the hair. I care about separating the hair from the background. So what I'm looking for is contrast. Again, I want to ultimately make a mask. So contrast between the hair and the background, especially all this really fine shit. I don't really care about her shoulders and her cheek and all of that. I can do that with a pen tool. I can do that with a paintbrush, even if I'm really good with it. But how do you do the hair? That's the challenge in this and the thing that should be driving your decision in this. So I'm going to look at the red channel. What I'm looking for is contrast. I'm looking at the red channel and I'm looking at the hair. So I've picked the red channel. You see the mask that's there. That's what I've actually got. I'm going to go to the green channel right now, and when I clicked on the green channel, her skin became darker, but her hair actually got lighter. So the green channel is not as good for me to separate the hair as the red channel was. Does that make sense? Again, go back to the red. Much darker. That's what I'm really looking for, is black and white. Now, it doesn't matter whether I mask the girl out of the background. So if the girl goes black and the background's white, it doesn't matter because I can just invert that. Or if the opposite happens, all I'm looking for is to have the background be one and the girl be the opposite. I don't really care which is which. Make sense? So I'm looking at the red channel, pretty good. Looking at the green channel, not as good. Looking at the blue channel, and the blue channel is, again, much darker skin, but it's horrible for the hair. So my best shot at doing this is going to be the red channel. So I'm going to click on the red channel and I'm going to copy it. Simply grab the red channel and drag it down to the little icon with the square at the bottom, and you'll make this copy of it called red copy. It's sitting down at the very bottom of your channels palette. Everyone good on this? Double click on the name and change it and call it Knockout 1. I call it knocking out, yes?
Where did you drag it to? Sorry.
See the little icon at the bottom? It's just like the one at the bottom of the layers palette. It's a square with the plus in the middle.
Yep.
It just duplicates it.
Awesome.
So I've actually got, it's called knockout. It's a phrase from old cinema that they would actually use, and they were plates that people would actually paint to actually do compositing work. It's a big thing in Gone with the Wind. But at any rate, that's why they call it knocking out. It's not like I'm going to hit this girl and knock her out. So at any rate, now I need to actually make the hair darker and the background lighter, because again, I'm trying to get that mask. What can do that? If I said to you I've got an image in Photoshop and I need to make part of it lighter and part of it darker, what would you say to me was the way to do it? Well, inverting it just changes it. If I hit Command-I to invert it, then it's just what was black is white and what is white is black. But I need, let's just, again, we're running out of time. It's levels, right? We use levels to actually change things. But I do not want to be too aggressive on this mask. I only want to get to the point that I need to get to actually have this function. So I need you to come to roughly the same spot as me. I'm going to go into this area of her hair right over in here. I'm going to zoom into that. Again, the keyboard shortcut for zooming is spacebar plus Command. And what I'm looking for in here is hair that I know needs to be solid black and then background. That's what I'm really looking for here. But the thing about hair is you can see there's areas in here that are like in lighter grays. Hair is not solid. Hair actually has got transparency to it. There's actually light that comes through hair. That's why when you see edge lighting, you actually see the light. You see that halo, that glow around people. It's because the light's actually coming through the hair. So there's areas of this hair that I don't want to be completely black. It would be an overly aggressive mask. It'll look like I've actually cut this out. So what I need to find is an area in here that I know should be solidly black. And so I can look at these areas right here where there's a lot of hair that's actually overlapping. Like I can look down in here. I know that something down in here, this area right down in here, know that this should be genuinely black because it's a lot of hair that's on top of one another. And so I know that there should be no light coming through that part. So that's where I'm going to actually go for. I'm going to actually go to a point right down here. So it's this one lock of hair down at the bottom. There, you can see there also is a highlight on the hair. She's got some shine in it, but that's okay. I'm fine with that part. I'm going to put a color sampler point on this so that I know what its value is and I can control it. So to do that, come up to your toolbar, come down, and what you're looking for is the eyedropper tool that will look like this. However, if you click on the drop-down menu, you will see that there is an eyedropper tool, but there's also a color sampler tool. You want to select the color sampler tool. So again, take a look at my screen, color sampler tool, and I'm going to come down to the highlight that's right on this area of that sort of like darker area of hair, and I'm going to click once, and it puts down a point with a number 1 on it, and it stays there. But look at your info palette. It also gives you a number 1 on the info palette. And the info palette is giving you a readout of the value of that tone that's right there. Again, you can only have, masks can only be grayscale. They can't have color in them. And that's why you get this readout that says K. If you look at the K on the number 1, the readout, it's giving you, K is for CMYK. It's black ink. It's giving you the value of that. 100% K would be black, 0% K would be white, 50% K, 50% gray. Anyway, those are not the numbers we're used to working with. We're used to working with RGB. So even though this is only a grayscale, we can change it to an RGB readout, which is what we need to do. So if you click on the eyedropper in the info palette, if you click on the eyedropper itself right under the number 1, you'll get a drop-down menu, and it will allow you to pick any color that you any color system that you want. I want you to pick RGB color. And now you'll see that you get a 62, 62, 62, relatively dark gray. Not black, black would be 0, but relatively dark. Is this working for everyone? We need to put another color point down on the background. So I typically try to stay in the same vicinity as the original point, but you need to make sure that you're far enough away from the hair that you don't make a mistake and clip some of the hair. So you would stay away from all of this area where there's hair and background mixed together. So I'm simply going to come out to the edge out here, and I'm going to click once, and I get a point number 2. You'll also see that my point number 2 shows up on my info palette. You'll also see that it is in K. Again, I'm going to click on the point number 2 eyedropper to get the drop-down menu and pick RGB color. And now I've got RGB color readouts. And my goal in this, your numbers may be slightly different, but they should be pretty close. I've got my first point in the hair that's reading in the 62s, and my background is reading in the 248. If this would be a perfect mask, I would actually change those 62s to 0 and those 248s to 255, black and white. Does this make sense, what I'm going for here? So, levels. This is not an adjustment layer thing. We are working on channels. We are not working on layers. You don't change anything in the layers palette. It's all over here in the channels palette. It is a destructive move, but it's okay because I'm doing it on this red copy. As a matter of fact, let me change that to knockout 1 again. I'm doing it to this. If I fuck this up, I simply throw it away and I start over again. I'm not damaging my image. So don't freak out about it too much. To run levels on this, you either come up to the image menu, come down to adjustments, and come down to levels, or you just hit Command L. Brings up the levels dialog box. Now, typically you would think that all you need to do is type 62 in for the black point and 248 in for the white point, and theoretically that should work, but it doesn't. So instead, what you need to do is you need to realize that in our info palette now, because we've brought up a levels which is going to change things, our numbers and readouts get doubled. And they get divided by this / line. And what that's telling you is that it's giving you a before and after readout. The values on the left side, so these 62s right here are the before. The 62s after are after once I actually make a change in this. It's the same right now because I haven't done anything with levels yet. But when I do start to change levels, the numbers on the left will not change. The numbers on the right will change. And that shows me what my change actually is, what I'm really doing. Make sense? So watch my screen really quick and then I'll let you guys do it as well. I'm going to grab the black point slider here and I'm watching this number set right here. And what I need to do is get these values, these 62s down to 0. So I'm going to start clicking and dragging across. And what you'll do is, and you'll see the hair is getting darker, which is exactly what I want it to do, is I start to get close to 0, stop. I'm at 4 right now. You do not want to keep using this slider to drag across because you can go too far. And what I mean by too far is I can continue all the way over like this, and yes, indeed, I got to 0, but my entire image is gone. So instead, what I want to do is get close. I'm at 4 right now, and then go to your up and down arrow keys and tap this in. I tapped my up arrow key twice, and that's what got me to 0. Now I'm going to actually do my white point. So I'm going to come over here and grab my white point slider and start to pull back. I'm trying to get these after numbers right here to get to 255. But again, I want to stop short on that. So I'm getting to a 251. Go to your up and down arrow keys. In this case, it's the down arrow, and tap only enough to get to 255. And then before you say anything, I'm going to simply back out and take a look at this image. Again, I use my keyboard shortcuts to back out. What I'm looking for here, what I want to make sure is that I haven't gotten too aggressive with this. Look at the hair that's actually in this. It's all still feathery. It's actually pretty well done. Use your preview check mark to turn this on and off to sort of see what it is you actually done. And this to me looks like the beginnings of a pretty good mask. So I need you guys to set your levels. If you want the same number as I did, and this is what I was talking to you about before, look at my black point. My entry in my histogram for my levels part is only 52. If I'd put in 62, which you would think you needed to do, your mask would be too aggressive. Everybody good on this part? All right, and then simply hit OK. I'm going to double click the hand to kick back out. Now there's work that we actually need to still do on this. I'm going to take a look around in here. Don't worry about her face right now. But I can see areas in here where the parts of her or the background are showing through. You want that. All of this is areas where background is showing through. You want all of those parts. But what's complicating for me right now is the skin. To be perfectly honest with you, the skin transitions right here are problematic for me. So I'm going to go after this with a brush. So to start it off, I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make it a smaller brush. You need to actually change the edge of this brush to make it 100% hard. You want to make sure that you're not spraying anything out onto the background that you don't need to be on the background. And you can actually go after all of this area here and stay away from your edges, but I can go after all of this area in here that I know needs to be black part of that mask. Again, I'm staying away from the edges, but I'm getting close to this. This area that's in her ear right here, I can get all of that. All of this area I can simply paint. This would be a really good time to go to your tablet. It will make this work a whole lot easier. And so I'm just painting in these areas right in here. I'm taking care of all of that. I'm going to zip back out here. And I'm going to paint all of this. Again, stay away from the, oops, I just said stay away from the edges and then I just hit one of my edges. I'm going to paint out all of this. I'm going to stay away from the edges though. And that's basically what I'm looking to do in here to get rid of all of that. But now I've got the edges that I need to deal with. And I'm going to zoom into this edge and it's going to be her right shoulder. If you change the blending mode of your brush, so I've got a brush, I'm not changing the blending mode of my layers, there are no blending modes and channels, but in the drop-down menu for the mode of your brush, you can go from normal down to overlay. Overlay is a contrast brush. Look what happens. I have got black as my foreground color. I'm going to come over here to this area of white and I'm going to paint and nothing happens. Because using a blending mode of overlay, what it does is that anything that is lighter than 50% gray can only be made lighter. Anything that's darker can only be made darker. So if I hit the X key to make white my foreground color and try to paint on this black area, nothing happens. It protects it. And I want to use that to get to these edges. So I'm going to hit the X key to go back to black. I do have an overlay brush. It's still going to be a hard overlay brush. And I'm simply going to start painting on this area that is the line along her shoulder. And you can see as I start to go down, it actually starts to get darker. It picked up a little background. I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. I'm going to hit this brush a second time across this. And you can see it actually draws the line that is exactly her shoulder. I'm going to go after her neck up here. And again, this shoulder right here. Now, I've gotten the shoulder pretty good, but look at my screen really quickly. You can see that it actually picked up a little of the background right there, which I don't want to actually have happen. I think that's background. Hang on one second. Nope, that's actually background right there. So you hit the X key to get white as your foreground color, and you do the same trick on the background. And you can see it actually repeated times cleans that out. Now you'll see that this area right in here, all of a sudden now I can tell I've actually got, it's really hard to see on my screen, but if you look at it on your image, you'll be able to see that because I'm using a hard brush in this area right here, I've got a really hard line right here. At this stage of the game, you want to go to a completely soft brush. And then, again, I'm never going to have this be perfect, but what I'm going to do is go to a little bit larger brush as well. Sorry, to get rid of the flyout menu, click on Adobe. I'm just going to go to a little bit bigger brush, and I'm just going to click and drag and pull away from her hair here. It destroys a little bit of the hair, but not too much. And then I'm also going to clean this area right out in here. And that actually gives me a pretty good job. Now I'm hovering over this area all the way out here by the side of her face. I mean, the side of her hair out here. This has actually already gone to white. I can tell because I'm looking at my info palette. Now we actually need to do the other side. So on the other side, still got an overlay brush, hitting the X key to black to be my background color. And I'm simply going to start dragging down along her skin here repeatedly to actually get that to go completely black. And then finally I'm going to hit the X key to clean up the little bit that spilled out into the background and get rid of that part that's by her hair over in here. And I'm back out to white again. The last thing that I've got is her cheek, and it's the only thing that we need to finally figure out here, and then we'll actually be pretty good to go. There's a little bit of the strap of her dress that's right here that I need to fix, so I'm going to change this back to a normal brush. I'm going to make it a completely hard brush because, again, I don't want to spray anything out into the background, and I'm simply going to hit the X key to make, get the flyout menu to go away, X key to make black my foreground color, and I'm just going to tap those areas to actually get rid of them. Now later on we're going to find out better ways to actually do the rest of this work right in here, but for the time being I want to just get the rest of her cheek, and I want to do it pretty quick so that we can see how effective this ultimately did work. To do that, I can't really see her cheek on this. That's the problem. If you come up to the very top and you click on the eyeball for RGB, what you'll see is the black of the image turns red and the rest of the image remains unchecked. It's like a quick mask is what it is. So this shows me where I actually need to use my brush to paint to actually get this part to go black. So again, I am still working on this knockout channel. You can tell because it's highlighted. I'm going to go back to a completely hard brush. You need to do this as a hard brush. Do not try to paint down this line. You will never do it. What you do is, look at my screen here really quickly. You line up the very edge of your brush with the edge of the part of her face that you want, and you simply tap once. And then you come down a little bit and you tap again and tap again and tap again, and you step your way down this. And that is the best way to do this. Now, we will find much better ways of doing this in a couple of weeks. But at least this will get me close enough. There's a small little bit right there and there and there and there and there. So now I think I'm ready to find out if this thing actually worked. If you want to get rid of the red, turn the eyeball off, double click on the hand. This is now my layer mask that I'm actually going to use for this guy, and we'll see how it works. How many have I lost? Some of you guys with me still? Good job. All right, well, let's find out how well we did. Come back and click on just the RGB channel. I'm going to make a copy of my background layer. So simply click on background layer, hit Command J to actually make a copy of it. Then I'm going to put a solid color in between the two. So if you actually select on the background copy, again, I want to protect that. I always keep a virgin copy of my image. I am going to actually mask the one that's on the top, but I want to put a different background in between the two. So I'm going to select on this. So simply select the background layer, Command J.
Oh, I'm still in the red selection.
Oh, you've still got the red mask over all of it? Simply click on the RGB channel at the very top. Did that work?
Yes, I'm still.
Okay. So again, I want to put a solid color in between the two. I want to give her a new background. So I'm going to click on this background layer that's on the bottom. I'm going to go to my Add Adjustment layer. I'm going to come up and add a solid color. And the solid color that I'm going to pick, I'm going to do a cyan. We'll just see how a cyan looks in this guy. So to get to cyan, I'm going to click on my RGB colors. And I'm going to select, cyan is a mix entirely of green and blue. So 0 red, hit the tab key 255 for the green, tab key 255 for the blue, and you'll see it makes a pretty cyan for me, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And now I can't see it. Say what? So select the bottom layer. I want to put this between the two. So select the bottom one. Click on the Add Adjustment layer icon at the bottom, the circle that's half black, half white. Come up to Solid Color. And then type in, again, 0 red, Tab key 255 green, Tab key 255 blue. That makes cyan. Now I can't see the cyan because the background layer that's on the top is hiding everything. So I'm going to use the mask that I just made to mask that out. So going back to the channels layer, hover over the thumbnail. Do not select the channel. Just hover over the thumbnail, hold down the Command key and click. It loads that mask as a selection. Come back over to the very top layer now of the background copy and click on Add Layer Mask. And you end up with art. And you just say to your mom and dad, all that money that you spent and helped me do all of this, this is what I'm doing, baby, and I'm loving it. And I'm going to make a fortune. I'm going to actually take up blowing glass later on. Yes?
Do that one last part again. Hover over the RGB.
Nope. So hang on. All right. So basically you've got a solid color layer, right? And you've got this layer on top. Come over to the bottom of your channels palette. That's where your knockout mask that we just built is. Do not select it. Just hover over the thumbnail, hold down the Command key, and click. It will load it as a selection. You should get a bunch of marching ants. Come back over to the background copy at the very top of your layers palette and add it as a layer mask. And it turns out blue. It's because my mask is inverted. But the easiest fix in the world, simply hit Command I on your layer mask is selected, Command I, you invert it. Girl in a blue background. Are you fucking kidding me? Look at this. Look at the quality of what you just did. You are no longer a $9.50-hour retoucher. You are now the, well, in the city of Chicago, you're now the $75 an hour retoucher. Okay, you've got a blank layer mask on here, so first throw that guy away. Okay. Yeah, so just hit Command D to deselect. You're okay. And then hover over the red copy at the bottom. Just hover over the thumbnail, Command click. Perfect. Come back over to this layer. It's selected, and just add layer mask. Perfect. But the mask is inverted. It's showing the background and not the girl. So invert the mask, Command I. Boom. Look at that work. Are you kidding me? Yes. It's only because you got the eyeball on the, scroll down to the bottom of your channels palette. There's an eyeball is still on. If you see red, it means you're really pissed off. No, if you see red, it's because of this. You've still got the eyeball on the, sorry, not that. You've got the eyeball on the knockout still turned on. You just turn it off. But I want you to go in and look at the quality of these edges. Look at the quality of that hair. Are you kidding me? Right now, the inner you should be fucking jumping up and down with joy. Because this is next level. You need to, I would love to say you need to go out to a bar drinking with all your friends and bet them that you can outmask them and whip this image out. You'd be drinking free for the rest of your life, but none of us can really go to bar, well, I don't know. Things are getting better, don't you think? A little bit? Yeah. Yeah, I think we're going, I don't know, fingers crossed. Are there questions about this? All right, so your assignment to go over, and we'll go over it really quickly. It's very simple. Well, if you talk to anybody who's been in this class and just mention the word sunny, that's all you need to say. And because everyone who's ever taken this class has actually done this file. So I'm going to see all that work, and I'm just going to throw it away. This is sunny. And so this is what your assignment is you are going to make 4 copies of Sunny. So I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. I've just made 4 layers of Sunny. One of those layers is going to be the virgin. So I'm going to say down here the background copy. Again, you always keep a copy, a layer that you do nothing to, 0 to. You never retouch. You don't do anything to it. It stays as your safety in case something goes wrong. Your first layer is actually going to become background, a blue background. I'm going to actually type this in. And what it's supposed to be is a selection that only shows the blue. All of the rest of the figure, the hair, the skin, the sweater, are all hidden. The next layer is going to be the sweater. You're going to make a selection that shows only the sweater. Again, this is going to be a layer mask. Do not apply those masks. Do not do this destructively. This will actually be a layer that's got a mask on it that only shows the sweater. The next one that you make is going to show only the skin. When I say skin here, that includes her teeth and her eyes. Don't worry, you don't need to actually get rid of that part. So basically, again, hands, neck, face. And then the final one at the very top is her hair. And that's the assignment for next week.
Sweater, skin, and then...
You can read the assignment. It's all written out. There's 4 elements in here. There's a background, the sweater, her skin, and her hair. You need to separate those 4. Are there questions about any of this? Are we good? I will see you guys next week. And I know I've said to a number of people here, let's deal with it after class. Is there still stuff that we need to fix for certain people after class? Yeah, okay. Let me stop this video, get some lights on, and we will do whatever we need to do.